Hi, my name is Everett. Today I'm reading World at War Super Edition Magic Treehouse Series. Book number 1. When the Magic Treehouse takes Jack and Annie to World War II, Europe is in trouble. They must go behind enemy lines to crack a code that could save lots of lives. But this is war. Jack and Annie might be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Can they help before the great Battle of D-Day begins? You will find out when we read Magic Treehouse, book number 1, World at War, 1944. Prologue. One summer day in Frog Creek, Pennsylvania, a mysterious treehouse appeared in the woods. It was filled with books. A boy named Jack and his sister Annie found the treehouse and soon discovered that it was magic. They could go to any time and place in history just by pointing to a picture in one of the books. While they were gone, no time at all passed back in Frog Creek. Jack and Annie eventually found out that the treehouse belonged to Morgan Le Fay. Morgan is a magical librarian from the legendary realm of Camelot. They have since traveled on many adventures in the magic treehouse and completed many missions for Morgan Le Fay and her friend Merlin the Magician. Teddy and Kathleen, two young enchanters from Camelot, have sometimes helped Jack and Annie in both big and small ways. Now Jack and Annie are about to receive an expected call from help. Chapter 1, Commando. Jack! Annie shouted from the yard. Jack looked up from his book. Tired from a soccer game, he was lying on his bed reading about volcanoes on Mars. Late afternoon shadows stretched across his room. Jack! Jack! Jack stood up and crossed to the window. Annie was standing by her bike. A towel was draped around her neck. Her hair was wet from swimming in the lake. She was looking up at the sky as if she were searching for something. What do you need? Jack called through the screen. Come down, Annie called. Help me look. Look for what? Said Jack. Just come, said Annie. You won't believe it. Jack sighed and marked his place in the book and went downstairs to the porch. This better be good, he said. I was in the middle of a book. Annie was still looking up at the sky. Where did he go? She asked. Where did who go? Said Jack. Annie didn't answer. She walked to the edge of the yard and kept looking. Oh, darn, I don't see him. See who? Said Jack. What are you talking about? The pigeon, said Annie. Jack stared at Annie for a moment. Seriously, he said. You're looking for a pigeon? Yes. You called me away from my book to see a pigeon, said Jack. Yes. Help me find him, said Annie. Jack rolled his eyes and stepped into the yard. He looked up at the hazy sky. He was following me, said Annie. He swooped down near my head, said Annie, still looking in every direction. I don't see him now. Where could he have gone? What's the big deal, said Jack. We see pigeons every day. Not like this one, said Annie. When I was getting on my bike at the lake, I heard a loud cooing sound. I looked up. He was sitting on a branch and he looked straight into my eyes. He was super intelligent, and I could tell. Are you sure you were in the sun too long? Jack asked. I'm serious, said Annie. He had these intelligent eyes. I talked to him like I said hi, and then he took off. I thought, okay, so much for that. But then I started riding home and he flew right in front of my path, right across my path. How do you know it's the same pigeon? Asked Jack. I just know it, said Annie. He circled above me all the way home, said Annie. He even swooped down a couple more times, but now I don't see him now. I don't see him at all. Her voice trailed off as she looked up at the sky and around the yard. Well, that's enough pigeon hunting for me, said Jack. I'm heading back into my book. He turned to go inside. Ah, I see him, said Annie. I see him, Annie whispered. Jack stopped. Where? There. Annie pointed to a plump pigeon perched on a bird feeder that was hanging from a maple tree. She stepped toward him. The pigeon didn't move. She stepped closer and closer. The bird still didn't move. Oh, wow, Jack, you won't believe this. I didn't see it until now. What? See what? Said Jack. Oh, wow, Annie whispered. Jack walked slowly toward Annie. When he reached her side, he stopped. He stared at the pigeon. It was an ordinary-looking pigeon, smoky gray with white-black stripes on its wings and iridescent green neck feathers. His amber-colored eyes stared at Jack. Look at his leg, Annie whispered. Attached to one of the pigeon's spindly legs was a tiny red canister. Whoa, whispered Jack. I think he's a carrier pigeon. A carrier pigeon, said Annie. Yeah, they carried messages to people a long time ago, said Jack. There used to be a lot of them, but not anymore. Why not, asked Annie. They're not needed anymore, said Jack. Not with technology like the internet and cell phones. The pigeon made a loud cooing sound. Why did he follow you, said Jack. And where did he come from? Annie took a deep breath. I know where he came from. I just figured it out, she said. Where? Another time, said Annie. A time before the internet and cell phone. Jack's heart skipped a beat. You think? I know, said Annie. And the message is for us. She moved and a step closer toward the pigeon, but the bird flapped in his wings and took off of the feeder. Then he soared out of the yard and up the street, disappearing into the Frog Creek woods. Let's go, cried Annie. Wait, I'll get my packs. Jack bolted into the house, grabbed his backpack from the hallway, and hurried outside. Jack and Annie raced up the sidewalk. They crossed the street and ran into the Frog Creek woods. As they weaved in and out of dark gray shadows, the late summer air smelled of sun-dried wood and fallen pine needles. Birds called lazily from the treetops. Finally, they stopped at the base of the tallest oak. Of course, said Annie. She grabbed the rope ladder and started up. Jack followed as they both scrambled inside the treehouse. Golden sunlight lit the stack of books and the shimmering them on the floor. Of course, said Jack. A soft cooing sound came from the windowsill. The carrier pigeon was peeking back and forth. Of course, a million times, said Annie, laughing. Don't fly away, I won't hurt you, I promise. The pigeon stopped pacing and stared at Annie with amber eyes. I can take that message from you, said Annie. If you don't mind. He doesn't mind, said Jack. He's a professional. Right, said Annie. The pigeon was very still as Annie reached out and gently opened the lid of the canister attached to the pigeon's leg. She pulled out the tiny scroll. Then she snapped the lid shut and unrolled this piece of paper. Jack and Annie looked at the writing. It wasn't elegant like Merlin or Morgan Le Fay's handwriting. It was a scroll of a kid's handwriting. Jack looked at the signature. It's from Teddy, he said. Uh-oh, said Annie. What happened? Did he goof up again? I'll bet he did, said Jack. They both laughed. The apprentice from Morgan Le Fay often made them laugh. Sometimes he did big mistakes trying to do magic. Many of the mistakes were funny. A few had been terrible. Annie read the letter aloud. Dear Jack and Annie, I sent Commando to find you. Commando? Jack interrupted. That's a funny name for a Camelot pigeon. Yeah, it sounds like a tough army guy, said Annie. She kept reading. Kathleen and I are working in the forces of good in one of the darkest hours of history, and we need your help. Please come to Glastonbury, England, right now. Your friend, Teddy. I can't wait to see Teddy and Kathleen, said Annie. Yeah, said Jack. He was especially excited to see Kathleen, the brilliant young enchanter from Camelot. But what does Teddy mean? One of the dark hours of history. Annie shrugged. The pigeon made a low cooing sound. Commando wants us to hurry, said Annie. Okay, let's go, said Jack. He took another deep breath and pointed to the words Glastonbury, England, on the tiny piece of paper. I wish we could go there, he said. The wind started to blow. The trail started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. Chapter 2. Top Secret. Commando cooed as if saying goodbye. Then he flapped his wings and flew out of the treehouse. He disappeared into the misty gray twilight. Thank Commando, Annie called after him. Well, I guess we're here, said Jack, shivering in the chilly air. But our clothes didn't change. I wonder why. The treehouse had landed on a branch of the tall maple tree. Through the haze, Jack could see ducks floating on ponds and sheep grazing in meadow bordered by hedgerows. Beyond the hedgerows were broken down buildings, stone pillars, and crumbling archways. There was no sign of people. It looks ancient, said Annie. Is Glastonbury part of Camelot? I don't know, said Jack. It sort of looked like Camelot, said Annie. Yeah, the ruins of Camelot, said Jack. Teddy! Kathleen! Annie called. There was no answer. Let's go looking for them, said Jack. He grabbed his backpack. He and Annie climbed down the rope ladder, then stepped onto the wet grass and started across the meadow. Rounding a hedge, they came upon the remains of what had once been a church. The roofless building had tall ivy-covered walls and gray arches made of stone blocks. Cheerio, friends! A teenage boy strode through one of the arches. The boy wore an old-fashioned flight suit, gloves, and tight-fitting leather helmet. He carried a khaki duffel bag. "Teddy!" cried Annie. She and Jack hurried to the young enchanter of Camelot. Teddy put his duffel bag down and they all hugged. "I'm glad Commando found you," said Teddy. "He's a quiet, smashing soldier, you know." "Who, the pigeon?" said Annie. "Yes, Commando is a member of the National Pigeon Service," said Teddy. Jack and Annie giggled. "You're kidding, right?" said Jack. "Not at all," said Teddy. "Pigeon breeds have given over 200,000 pigeons to the British military to carry messages throughout Europe. Commando has been on dozens of missions. The missions were all on this time, of course. He needed the treehouse to take you to your time." "So what is this time?" asked Jack. "It is June 4th, 1944, said Teddy. "And you have landed in Glastonbury, England. It is the site of one of the great monasteries of Europe. You can still see an ancient tower on the scared hill of Glastonbury Tor." He pointed to a conical hill overlooking a flat countryside. "Eventually all the buildings came into ruin, but legends of King Arthur still surround this area. For that point, I thought it might be a good place to meet you. A living midpoint between our worlds. Where's Kathleen?" said Annie, looking around. "We thought she'd be with you." "Well, that is why I called for you," said Teddy. "But first, how much do you know about World War II? Jack asked. "Did you come to the time of World War II? He said. "I'm afraid you did. The war's been going on for almost 5 years, said Teddy. "Oh man," said Jack. "So you know about World War II? said Teddy. "Some," said Jack. "We know an African American fought Germany and Italy and Japan, and a man named Adolf Hitler was the leader of Germany, and his political party was called the Nazis. And we also know that 3 of our great-grandfathers fought in the World II, said Annie. "The people in England are grateful for all the help the Americans are giving them fighting this war," said Teddy. "At this point, Nazis have taken over most of Europe. They have killed countless innocent civilians, including millions of Jewish people." "That's terrible," said Annie. "Really terrible," said Jack. "But what does Kathleen and you have to do with you and Kathleen?" "When Merlin looked into the future, he saw this frightful time," said Teddy. "He saw how important it was to bring hope to British leaders, so he sent me and Kathleen to me in London." "The leaders actually met with you?" asked Jack. Teddy smiled. "Indeed they did," he said. "Kathleen used a bit of magic to make us older than we are. We were quite brilliant, wearing the right disguises and using the right manners and speech. We seem to have inspired everyone, including the Prime Minister Winston Churchill." "Really?" said Jack. "Yes," said Teddy. "In fact, Winston included Kathleen and me into the SOE. "What's that?" asked Annie. "SOE stands for Special Operations Executive," said Teddy. "It's the top secret organization of Winston formed and conducted undercover missions in countries occupied by the Nazis. In the short time of Kathleen and I completed the required training, we both have been sent on many secret assignments." "Is Kathleen on assignment now?" asked Annie. "Yes, Kathleen left for a mission in France more than 3 weeks ago, and now..." Teddy stopped. "And now what?" said Jack. "Now it seems she disappeared," said Teddy. "Oh no, what happened to her?" asked Annie. "I do not know that," said Teddy. "What was her mission?" asked Jack. "I do not know that either. She could not tell me," said Teddy. "Secret agents must keep their secret missions even from each other. All I know that is 2 weeks ago I was asked to fly behind enemy lines to a location in Normandy, France, to pick her up." "Fly behind enemy lines?" said Jack. "Yes, I've done that many times," said Teddy. "But when I arrived at the meeting place, she was not waiting for me. I was frantic. Then yesterday I received a message from her delivered by a French carrier pigeon." "So she's okay?" asked Annie. "Well, at least I know she's alive," said Teddy. "The problem is she wrote the message in the code, in case the code fell into enemy hands. but I have only successed to try to sense the shirt and parts of it. He pulled out a small piece of paper from his pocket and read Kathleen's note. Come to me in the darkest time, a wand I needed, a magic rhyme. 3 miles leave to Sir Kay's grave, cross a river to find a cave. Look for knights and small round towns, a crack in the rock beneath the boughs. Teddy sighed. You see why I cannot share this with anyone in the SOE, he said. Even if the code was deciphered, others would not understand her request for a wand and magic rhyme. But why does she need them? Asked Jack. Her magic is amazing. Remember when she turned us all into seals? Yes, but these are very, very dark times, said Teddy. I'm not surprised that she may need extra magic. I have found my own power very limited. That is why I sent for you. So, do you have something we can take to Kathleen? Asked Jack. Oh yes, I have the wand of Dianthus and the Rontua and Locket's magic. Great, said Annie. The 2 lines of the message I do understand, said Teddy. He read on. 3 miles east of Sir Kay's grave, cross a river to find a cave. The secret burial places of King Arthur's knights are revealed in one of Merlin's books, said Teddy. Kathleen knew I would know that the burial places for Sir Kay is Caen, a town in Normandy, France. Wait, I better write that down, said Jack. He pulled his notebook and pencil into his backpack. Spell that, please. C-A-E-N, said Teddy. Jack wrote the town's name in his notebook. Okay, we go to Caen, said Annie. We travel 3 miles east, cross a river, and look for a cave. Yes, said Teddy, but I cannot imagine what the next 2 lines could mean. He read from the note. Look for knights and small round clouds or cracking in the rock beneath the boughs. Teddy looked up. Do you understand this? Not really, said Jack. There weren't knights fighting in World War II. Indeed not, said Teddy. There's small round cows, a crack in the rock, boughs. What does that all mean? He folded the note and handed it to Annie. Well, I trust you to figure this out. I know you are expert decoders. You're kidding, said Jack. Us? Of course, said Teddy. When Kathleen and I went to New York, you figured out the secret poem to free the unicorn and the museum tapestry, remember? And Morgan's missions were often written as riddles. Yes, but, started Jack, we have to find Kathleen, said Teddy. I cannot lose her. Many people have been lost in this war. It really is the darkest time. Truly a terrible time. It's okay, Teddy. We'll help you. Of course, said Jack. We'll do our best. Teddy took a deep breath and smiled. Thank you, my friends, he said. I'm almost grateful, and I'm sorry I cannot be with you. You're not coming with us? Asked Jack. No, tonight the SOE is sending me on an urgent mission to rescue down airmen in Holland and Belgium, said Teddy. I must do it before daylight. Wow, said Annie. It is the sort of thing the SOE does every day, said Teddy. Then he clapped his hands together. All right, let's roll up our sleeves and get moving. It's time to put on your parachute. Parachute, said Jack. Yes, said Teddy. You cannot jump from a plane without parachutes. He picked up his duffel bag and strode off. Wait, did Teddy just say we're going to jump from a plane? Jack asked Annie. He did, said Annie. But don't worry. He's going to give us magic. She hurried along with Teddy. I know, but, began Jack. Come on along, Jack, Teddy called to him. The moon is rising over Glastonbury Tor. Chapter 3, Spy Taxi. A full moon glowed over Glastonbury Tor as Jack and Annie followed Teddy between the hedges. Moon shadows stretched along the ground. Teddy unrounded a tall bush at the edge of Abbey grounds. There she is, he said. He pointed to a small plane sitting at the edge of an open field. Oh man, Jack, is that real? He thought the tiny plane looked like a cartoon. It has a single propeller, was attached to a rounded nose, and it had big clunky tires. Yes, we call it a spy taxi, said Teddy. It was made especially for secret operations. It can fly low under enemy radar and land in tight spaces. How many people does it carry? Asked Jack. It's designed to carry only a pilot and 1 passenger, said Teddy, but it also has room for supply canisters, which I am not carrying with me. So one of you can take that space. But what about when we add Kathleen, said Jack. Do not worry, said Teddy. I think we can all squeeze together, and if that does not work, perhaps with the magic you bring her, Kathleen can make everyone fit. Good, said Jack. He was eager to get the wand of Dianthus from Teddy. And one other question. Where will you pick us up? At the same place I drop you off, said Teddy. I have been to that drop zone before. It is a lonely field. To our best of knowledge, it is not under enemy observation. You will have to get back there wherever you find Kathleen. Got it, said Annie. But the equally important question is when I will pick you up, said Teddy. And that is a question you will have to answer. How do we answer, asked Annie. When you know that it is time to leave, you must send a secret message, said Teddy. By pigeon, asked Annie. No, a carrier pigeon might be difficult for you to find. It would be easier to send the message over a wireless radio, said Teddy. What should our message say, asked Annie. In your message, say, Teddy thought for a moment and then smiled, say, the unicorn is free, and, wait, said Jack. He wrote in his notebook, the unicorn is free, and add the date and time, said Teddy. Send the message over the wireless radio, and I will pick you up at that time in the field where I drop you off tonight. How do we find a wireless radio, asked Jack. As you go about your mission, be on the lookout for members of the French resistance, said Teddy. Any one of them will help you find a wireless radio. What's a French resistance, asked Annie. Throughout France, there are French citizens who are secretly fighting back against the Nazis who have occupied their country, Teddy explained. They are called resistance fighters. They live very dangerous lives. If a member of the French resistance is caught by the Nazis, he or she will be imprisoned or killed. That's terrible, said Annie. So how do we find somewhere in the French resistance? There are many ways, said Teddy. The simplest way, though, is to make the V is for victory sign. He held up 2 fingers in the shape of a V. It is the secret way for the resistance fighter to recognize another. You can make the sign with your fingers, draw it on a piece of paper, scratch it into dirt, or signal it any way you can, said Annie. Jack and Annie both held up fingers, and a V is for victory sign. Good, but be very careful, said Teddy. If you give the sign to the wrong person, you could be up in the hands of the enemy. Teddy reached into his large duffel bag and took out some clothes. These are your disguises, he said. He handed Jack and Annie each a pair of corridor overalls and a long-sleeved shirt. They pulled them on over their shorts and T-shirts. And these, said Teddy, he handed each of them a pair of boots. They took off their sneakers and pulled on their boots. And a field pack instead of your backpack, said Teddy. He gave Jack an old-fashioned looking pack with buckles. You will have to wear it on your chest. Your parachute will be on your back, said Teddy. Jack moved his notebook pencil from his backpack into the field pack. He left his backpack beside his sneakers. And now your flying gear, said Teddy. He took out 2 leather helmets and 2 pairs of goggles. Jack and Annie each put on a tight-fitting leather helmet. Jack adjusted his goggles over his glasses. And a torchlight, said Teddy. He handed a large, heavy flashlight to Jack. Jack put the flashlight into his field pack. And now Teddy climbed into a short step ladder in the door of the plane and pulled it out 2 bulky contraptions. They looked like long canvas backpacks, each attached to a complicated web with straps and buckles. Your parachute harness, said Teddy, designing the suspender. Come on, I will strap you in. One at a time, Teddy buckled Jack and Annie into their parachutes. Then he attached the field pack in front of Jack's harness. So how does all this work, said Jack. He was trying to stay calm. Teddy pointed to the large metal ring on the strap across Jack's chest. This is your ripcord handle. When you pull it, it will release the parachute. Okay, but when do we pull, asked Jack. After you step off the plane, you will plunge through open air, said Teddy. Count to 5 and then pull hard on the handle. Easy, easy. Jack felt a little sick already. Remember, jump quickly one after another, said Teddy. If you do not, you will land too far apart and lose each other completely. Got it, said Annie. And finally, said Teddy, he handed them each a printed card with a small photograph. identity cards. Now you each have friends' names, Jean and Amy. Where did you get our photos? Asked Jack. A tap of the wand helped with that, said Teddy. Cool, said Jack. He was relieved when he remembered they would have the wand of Dianthus. He thought their mission would be impossible without magic. Climb aboard, said Teddy. He scrambled up the ladder. Annie bounded after him. Jack didn't know how she did it. The parachute equipment felt heavy and clumsy. He climbed awkwardly into the plane after Annie and Teddy. Teddy was already sitting at the control pilot seat in front of the control panel. Position yourselves behind me, he said. Jack and Annie crouched into a narrow space behind the pilot seat, squashed by their parachute gear. Remember, when you jump, face Earth, said Teddy. Arch your back, spread your arms, and count to 5. Then pull your ripcord handle. As you float down, keep your elbows in, then roll to your left side. Wait, said Jack. Can you go over that all again? Easy, said Teddy. 8 simple steps. Hold on, I'll write them down, said Jack. He pulled out his notebook and pencil from this field pack as Teddy gave the directions again. Jack wrote, 1. Lace together. 2. Face Earth. 3. Arch back. 4. Spread arms. 5. Count to 5. 6. Pull ripcord. 7. Elbows in. 8. Roll to the left. Jack and Annie stared at the notebook, whispering the steps to himself. Got it, said Annie. After you land, said Teddy, roll up your parachute and hide them. Hide your helmets and goggles, too, and destroy your notes. Got it, said Annie. All right, said Teddy. Gas, oil. Jack peered around Teddy at the instrument panel. There was at least a dozen round gauges. Some monitored oil pressure, fuel temperature, and pressure. There were also compasses, brakes, controls, knobs, buttons, switches, and levers. Oh man, thought Jack, you must have had a lot of training, he said to Teddy. Indeed, a full week, said Teddy. A week, that's all, said Jack. Yes, it was very intense, said Teddy as he started flipping switches. They said I was natural. Green lights lit up the panel. Needle swung from right to left. Air intake control, Teddy announced. He turned a knob. It was much easier than learning magic. Jack felt a wave of panic. Teddy, slow down, he said. Engine starter up, said Teddy, pushing a button. Teddy, are you sure you know how to do this, said Jack, but his voice was drowned out by the sound of the engine as the propellers started to spin. The wheels began rolling. The plane shook as it bumped over the grass. Then, rocking from side to side, the spy taxi lifted into the air. As the tiny cramped plane climbed higher and higher into the moonlit night, Teddy pushed more buttons and pulled more levers and shouted out more information. Jack's heart was racing. He tried to focus on the 8 steps. He whispered, legs together, face Earth, arch back, spread arms, count to 5, pull ripcord, elbows in, roll to the left. What does that mean? Jack shook Annie's arm. What does number 8 mean? He shouted. What? Annie yelled. Number 8, said Jack, jabbing his finger at the list. Do you roll in the air or roll on the ground? I think on the ground, Annie answered. Jack nodded. That made more sense. As the plane rumbled through the night, Jack whispered the instructions to himself again and again. We're crossing the English Channel, Teddy called. Normandy soon, and your dropping point. Get ready. Jack crammed his notebook and pencil back into his field pack. His fingers were trembling so much he had trouble buckling it. We're over France now, shouted Teddy. Oh no, murmured Jack. We are coming to your drop zone, cried Teddy. Get ready to jump. Jack froze with fear. Open the door, yelled Teddy. Jack couldn't move. Annie opened the door and crouched at the edge of the plane. With the door open, the roar of the engine and propellers was deafening. Jack looked down at the endless dark. No way I can jump, he thought. Not without magic help. Jack pulled upright. Oh no, we forgot to get the wand. Teddy, we need, shouted Jack. Teddy couldn't hear him. Jump, he yelled. Wait, magic for Kathleen, cried Jack. It was too late. Annie leaned out of the plane and she fell toward, arching her back and spreading her arms. Teddy, the magic, cried Jack. Jump, Jack, Teddy yelled. Jack had no choice. He had to jump now or he had land far away from Annie and they'd never find each other. Jack closed his eyes and hurled himself out of the plane, down into the moonlit, windless night. Chapter 4, Behind Enemy Lines. Falling through the air, Jack forgot everything he had written down. He forgot. Legs together, face Earth, arch back, spread arms, count to 5, but miraculously he remembered pull ripcord. Jack fumbled for the cord on his chest strap. He grabbed the metal ring and pulled hard. The parachute popped out of Jack's harness. As the chute's white canopy opened above Jack, it yanked Jack back. The bellowing silk slowed his downward plunge. Jack clutched his field pack as he drifted through the night air. The drone of the spy taxi faded into the distance till he was gone. Not far away, Jack could see Annie in the moonlight, floating to Earth, too. "Hi!" she yelled to Jack. Jack was too amazed to answer. He was falling with a strange happiness as they both drifted in the dreamlike fall toward the ground. Suddenly, the earth rose up to meet him. Jack hit the ground with a thud, and remembering the step, he rolled onto his left side as he lay in the cold, damp grass trying to catch his breath. "We're in France! We did it!" Annie called from nearby. She threw off her parachute harness and ran to Jack. "We did it," he repeated, sitting up. His parachute lay spread on the ground behind him. "We did it! Wasn't that fun today?" Yeah, it was," said Jack, dazed. He wiggled out of his harness. Floating through the night sky actually had been fun. Although he had no idea how he'd done what he'd just done. "I have some bad news, though." "What?" asked Annie. "Teddy forgot to give us the wand of Dianthus," said Jack. "Oh, no," moaned Annie. "Oh, no is right," said Jack. "I guess that means we'll have to help Kathleen without magic, Stanley." "That's okay, we have skills." "Like what?" said Jack. "Well, just lots of skills," said Annie. "Don't worry, we can do this. Let's go." "Hold on, we have to roll up our chutes and hide them and figure out where we are first," said Jack. He and Annie looked around. In the moonlight, they could see trees bordering the field on 3 sides and a road on the 4th. A church with a white steeple was down the road. "Let's take that road," said Annie. "Yep," said Jack. "That should work. But we have to hide our parachutes before we go." In the quiet night, Jack stood up and strapped his pack on his back. He and Annie carefully rolled up the silk canopies of their parachutes. They gathered all of the straps and cords in their arms and started across the field. "Hey," said Annie, stopping. "I hear a plane." "Teddy's back," said Jack. He remembered we forgot to give us the magic wand and spell. "Yay," said Annie. "Wait," said Jack, squinting at the sky. Not just one plane, but 3 planes droned overhead. "It's not Teddy," said Annie. "Run," said Jack. As the planes dipped over the field, Jack and Annie ran toward the road, lugging their bundles of the parachutes. "Get down," Jack shouted. He pushed Annie into the ditch at the edge of the road. Clutching their gear, they landed the thick bed of wet and rotting leaves. The planes roared off into the distance. After a long moment of silence, Jack and Annie stood up. "They're gone," said Jack. "So what do we do now?" asked Annie. "We have to find that town," said Jack. He looked around in the moonlight. "But we might have to wait for daylight to figure out how to get there." Jack saw the glare of headlights coming up the road. "Hide!" cried Annie. They threw themselves face down again into the ditch. Jack held his breath as the car rumbled up. Soon all was quiet again, except for the distant barking of dogs. Jack and Annie lifted their heads. "We have to get away from this road," said Jack, "and find a place so we can stay hidden for a while. Remember, we're behind enemy lines. Nazis could be anywhere. Come on." Annie didn't move. She didn't say anything. "Hey, are you okay?" Jack asked her. "No, I'm scared," Annie said in a whisper. "You are?" said Jack. He knelt beside her. Annie was never scared. He was always the scared one. "It seems so dangerous," she said, "hiding from Nazis." Jack was frightened too. And she had been right. Hiding from Nazis seemed much scarier than anything that had been done before. But if Annie was scared, he had to act brave. "It's okay," he said. "Think about what you told me earlier. We don't have magic, but we have skills. We use the skills again and again on our missions, right?" "Right," said Annie. "We'll use them this time," said Jack. "Do you think we can?" asked Annie. "I know we can," said Jack. "First, we have to get to a safe spot." He pulled out their flashlight and pointed to the road. The light lit up a sign that said Beeville. Not far down the road was the white church. Okay, Beeville, this is where Teddy will pick us up with Kathleen. Right, said Annie. The field near the sign that said Beeville, near the white church. See, we solved that with our observation skills, said Jack. So now we'll head to the woods and cross road and hide there until daylight, okay? That's the skill of being smart, said Annie. She stood up. Let's bury our stuff here. Good idea, I forgot that, said Jack. Skills. See, we got them. They buried their parachute gear into the pile of leaves and brush. Don't forget these, said Jack. He pulled off their helmets and goggles and shoved them under the heap. Annie did the same. And my notes. Jack ripped his notes out of his notebook and tore them out. He hid the pieces with everything else. Okay, he said. Onward, let's go. With Annie close behind, Jack led the way across the road and into the woods, tramping through the tangled undergrowth. Jack and Annie made their way deeper into the moonlit forest. They didn't stop until they came to a wooden fence that, when Jack pointed his flashlight toward the area beyond the fence, it shone on neat rows of vine-covered tree leaves. Looks like a vineyard, he said. What's that? Asked Annie. You know, where they grow crops and make the wine, said Jack. We shouldn't trespass. Before he could finish, Annie grabbed his arm. Listen, Jack listened. From the woods behind them came the sound of dog barking. Then he heard men's voices. They were searching for us, said Annie. Trespass, said Jack. He turned off the flashlight and they scrambled over the wooden fence and took off running around the moonlit vineyard. They ran between the long rows of grapevines until they saw a small farmhouse ahead. Smoke was rising from the chimney. Not far from the house was a barn. The barking behind them grew louder. It sounded as if the searchers had entered the vineyard and were heading their way. There, said Jack. He grabbed Annie's hand and pulled her toward the barn. Jack yanked open the wooden door, and the two of them ran inside. Jack switched off the light. Jack switched his light back on and shone around the barn. Horses stood in their stalls, swishing their tails and munching hay. There, Annie pointed to a stack of hay bales in the back. They crouched together behind the bales. Jack turned off his flashlight and put it in his field pack. He and Annie waited motionlessly, huddled on the floor, inhaling the dust of animal smells and trying to breathe as quietly as they could. The barking grew louder and closer. The horses moved restlessly. Jack heard men shouting above the barking. He couldn't understand what they were saying. Then the door banged open. "Fritz, check inside," said a man. Jack heard two sharp barks and the sound of a dog sniffing and scratching. The next thing he knew, a German shepherd leaped over the hay bales. With a low growl, it bared its teeth. "It's okay," Annie whispered to the dog. "It's okay." The dog snorted and sniffed their faces. Jack didn't move a muscle as Annie gently stroked the dog's head and whispered in its ear. The dog grew calm. Annie whispered again. The shepherd licked her face, then it barked once and loped out of the barn. "Nothing's there, Fritz," said the man to the dog. "Good boy." Then the door slammed shut. The man's voices faded away. Everything grew quiet. Jack and Annie waited for a long moment. Then Jack let out his breath. "What did you say to that police dog?" he said. Annie shrugged. "I just said, 'Good dog, everything's okay, we're friends.' I just didn't tell him who friends we were." Jack shook his head with amazement. "Let's escape while we can," said Annie. Jack was relieved. Annie sounded like her old self again. Calming the dog seemed to calm her too, he thought. "Okay, but let's go slowly." Just as Jack and Annie stood up, the door of the barn creaked open again. Jack's heart was pounded as they dropped back behind the hay bales. The barn was lit with flickering lantern light. Jack heard footsteps on the wooden floor. The steps grew closer and closer. Then a man with a black beard peered over the hay bales. He wore a black beret slanted over one eye. "Aha, we found you," he said in a deep, growly voice. Chapter 5, Resistance. Jack was too terrified to speak. Annie slowly held up 2 fingers for a V for victory sign. "What is she doing?" Jack thought wildly. "We don't know who this guy is." The man glared at Annie for a moment. Then his craggy face broke into a smile and he held up the his fingers in the matching V. Oh man, thought Jack, did we really find a member of the French resistance? Who are they, Gaston? A woman called from the doorway. Who are you? Gaston asked in a raspy voice. Jack sputtered, terrified. Jean and Ami, Annie said quickly. Annie's a good spy, Jack thought. He'd completely forgotten their French names. Really? Said the man. Are those your real names? Annie laughed. No, our real names are Jack and Annie. Oh, brother, thought Jack. She was a terrible spy. And what are Jack and Annie doing in our barn? Asked Gaston. We're hiding from the Nazis, said Annie. Well then, said Gaston, you are in the right place. For the moment you are safe, children, said the woman, stepping forward. She wore a shawl around her shoulders and a kerchief around her dark hair. Hello, my dears, my name is Suzette, and this is my husband, Gaston. Nice to meet you, said Annie. Come with us back to our house, said Suzette. Jack and Annie climbed out of behind the hay bales and followed the French couple to the doorway of the barn. Before they left, Gaston blew out his lantern. Silence, he ordered, until we get into the house. Gaston and Suzette led Jack and Annie through the dark to the front doorway of the small stone farmhouse. Once they were all inside, Jack and Annie looked around the room. It had a low ceiling, candles burned on a heavy wooden table, and a fire flickered in the large fireplace. Suzette placed an iron bar over the front door while Gaston closed the window shutters. Sit, children, said Suzette. We'll have apple cider and we will share our dinner. Jack and Annie sat at the table near the hearth and a pot over the fire. Jack relaxed a little as he smelled roasting potatoes, onions, and carrots. Gaston poured cider into mugs, and Suzette prepared 4 bowls of stew. Then the couple joined Jack and Annie at the table. The fire cracked as they all ate quietly, sipped cider, and ate their dinner. When they were finished, Gaston leaned back in his chair and lit a pipe. You know, he said, when the Nazis were here earlier, they were not looking for you. They weren't? Asked Annie. No, they were looking for 2 paratroopers who had been spotted dropping into a field near here, said Gaston. Oh, then they were looking for us, said Jack. No, said Gaston. Gaston stopped and gave Jack a funny look. Unless you 2 could be those paratroopers. Yes, we could be, said Annie. But no, said Gaston again. How could 2 children parachute into Normandy, and why? We are working with agents of the SOE, said Annie. But no, said Gaston again. Oh my, said Suzette. Are things so bad that children are being recruited as spies now? Well, we're not just any children, said Annie. We were asked because one of our best friends is an SOE agent, and we have an information that she is 3 miles east of Cannes. We're supposed to find her and get her out of France. Then you do not have far to go, said Gaston. We're only 4 miles northwest of Cannes. There is a great danger, though, said Suzette. The city is surrounded by Nazi patrols. You will need the right papers. We have identity cards, said Annie. Good, said Gaston, standing up. Come with me. We will hide you here tonight, and we will help you get on your way in the morning. Thanks, said Jack, standing up with Annie. Thanks for the dinner, Annie said to Suzette. It is my pleasure to feed 2 brave children again, said Suzette. Why'd she say again, Jack wondered. Come on, said Gaston, waving his arm. Jack and Annie followed him to a room off the kitchen. Gaston pulled aside a floor rug, revealing a trap door. He lifted the door and then carried a lantern. He led Jack and Annie down the staircase to the cellar. Hundreds of wine bottles sat in racks along the walls of the dank, musty room. Suzette will bring bedding, said Gaston, and you can keep the light with you. He placed the lantern on a big, long table and then started back up the steps. Without looking back, he raised his hand. Good night, he said. Thank you, called Jack and Annie. When Gaston was gone, Annie sat down at the table. Wow, they saved us, she said. For now, said Jack. I wonder what these rubber blocks for, said Annie. She picked up a small block from the table and held it up in the lantern light. Look, it has the letter H. Jack walked over to her. On the table were dozens of small rubber blocks and several stacks of paper. This one has the letter S, said Annie, holding up another block. Here's a D, said Jack. S and U, they're all letters. They must be a printing set. Check this out, said Annie. She picked up a piece of paper from the stacks on the table. She showed it to Jack. He read the print on the page aloud. Hope and courage, freedom soon. Annie thumbed through more papers in the stack. They all say the same thing, she said. It's a bunch of flyers. Do you think Gaston and Suzette secretly passed them out? Here's your bedding, children, said Suzette, coming down the steps of the cellar. When she saw Annie holding the flyer, she stopped. Did you and Gaston print these? Annie asked. Suzette crossed the room and stood in the lantern light. No, we didn't, she said softly. Our sons did. Your sons? Asked Annie. Our brave twins, Tom and Theo, said Suzette. They were carriers from the French resistance. What are carriers? Asked Jack. Carriers travel on bicycles delivering messages from one resistance group to another, said Suzette. Tom and Theo also printed flyers to give people hope. On their carrier routes, they sometimes posted them when no one was looking. Only one day someone was looking. What happened? Asked Annie. 3 months ago, we received word that Tom and Theo were picked up in Paris by the Nazis, said Suzette. So they're in prison? Asked Annie. Suzette took a deep breath. We do not know what has happened to them, she said. I'm sorry, said Annie. Are Tom and Theo children? They are young men, 22 years old, said Suzette. But they will always be our children. Are you and Gaston in the French resistance too? Asked Annie. Suzette nodded. Our job is to gather and send information. She turned away from them. But now my job is to make your beds. We'll help, said Annie. Jack and Annie helped Suzette spread the thread blankets on the floor. I fear you will not be comfortable, said Suzette. But at least you will be safe. That's all that matters, said Jack. Thank you, Suzette, said Annie, and she hugged the French woman. Try to sleep now, children, said Suzette. You will need all your strength tomorrow to find your friend. Then she climbed the stairs and closed the door to the cellar. That's so sad about the boy, said Annie. Yeah, said Jack. He didn't know what else to say. It was amazing by the courage of Gaston and Suzette. Even after their sons were caught, the couple will still risking their lives to help others. So tomorrow we head to Cannes, said Annie. Jack nodded. Do you have Kathleen's message? Annie pulled the piece of paper from her pocket and read aloud. Come to me in the darkest time, a wand I need and a magic rhyme. 3 miles east of Sir Kay's grave, cross a river to find a cave. Look for knights and small round cows, a crack in a rock beneath the boughs. So we figured out the first 4 lines, said Annie. We know that Kathleen needs magic, which Teddy forgot to give us. Right, said Jack. And we know that go 3 miles east of a town named Cannes, and then cross a river to find a cave. Right, said Annie. And then the weird part, she reread. Look for knights and small round cows, a crack in a rock beneath the boughs. Jack shook his head. His brain was getting foggy. Let's ask Gaston and Suzette in the morning if they have any ideas, he said. Good plan, said Annie. They pulled off their boots and lay down on the ragged blankets. We'll figure it all out tomorrow, Annie murmured. Yeah, right now I'm too tired, said Jack, closing his eyes. He was exhausted from traveling through time to Glastonbury, flying over the English Channel, parachuting into Normandy, running from planes, lying in a ditch, hiding in a barn, escaping Nazis, and making friends with people in the French resistance, all between twilight and bedtime. Chapter 6. The Hour of the Battle. Jack, Annie, wake up, said Suzette. She stood at the bottom of the cellar stairs. It is morning. There is news. Jack opened his eyes. Where were they? He squinted at the racks of bottles against the wall of the table with the flyers and the printing set. Then he remembered a cellar in Normandy, France. What news? Said Annie. We just received a message from the London BBC, said Suzette. It is a message we have been waiting for. The hour of the great battle is coming tomorrow, June 6th. What battle? Asked Jack. The invasion of France, said Suzette. That invasion by the Allies, the English, Scots, American, and Canadians, and others will all invade France and drive out the Nazis, starting tomorrow. Really, said Jack? Yes, said Suzette. Excuse me, I must get back to Gaston. He's getting more news from the BBC over the wireless. She hurried up the steps. Oh, wow, said Annie. Did you hear what she said? Yes, the Allies, said Jack. No, the wireless, interrupted Annie. They have a wireless. Once we find Kathleen, we can come back here and send Teddy a message. You're right, said Jack. But now let's go find more about more about the invasion. Jack and Annie dashed up the stairs, taking 2 steps at a time. Gaston was at the kitchen table, smoking a pipe. He was hunched over a small open staircase. Inside was a radio with tubes and knobs. Gaston wore a headset and was listening carefully. "Plan Purple," he shouted. "Plan Purple," Suzette repeated. "Plan Purple? What's that?" said Jack. "It means the resistance must act now," said Suzette. "They must destroy communication lines to keep the Nazis in the south from finding out about the invasion." Gaston took off his headset and pointed his pipe at Suzette. "Plan Green and now Plan Purple." "What's Plan Green?" said Jack. "We received word of Plan Green a few days ago," said Suzette. "It called upon resistance fighters to blow up tracks and bridges to keep enemy troops from traveling here." "Why would they travel here?" asked Annie. "This is where the invasion will take place," said Gaston. "Here in Normandy. The Allies will come by air and sea. Tomorrow they will land on beaches not far from Caen, and then they will fight their way across France." "Oh man, I get it now," Jack murmured. "D-Day. Tomorrow is D-Day." "Listen to me, children," said Gaston. He pointed his pipe at them. "You must tell no one about what we have just told you." "We promised," said Annie, shaking her head. "And you must leave France at once," said Gaston. "Now." "Leave now?" said Jack. "Yes, return to England immediately," said Gaston. "There will be terrible fighting here tomorrow. Many bombs will drop." "But what about finding our friend Kathleen?" said Annie. "Oh, you cannot worry about your friend now," Gaston said. "You must worry about yourselves." "It is quite possible, children, that your friend has already gone south," said Suzette. "Perhaps she has already gone south," said Suzette. "Perhaps she has crossed the Pyrenees Mountains into Spain. Many people have escaped that way and found safety." "We have to at least try to find Kathleen before we can leave," said Annie. "That was our mission." "Then you only have today to find her," said Gaston. "You must leave France by nightfall." "We'd better get going then," said Jack. "Wait," said Jack. He turned to Gaston. "We have a favor to ask you. Can you send a message by wireless to our contact in the SOE to let him know we must be picked up tonight?" "Yes, I can do that," said Gaston. "And I will prepare food," said Suzette. "And I will get our stuff," said Annie. Suzette and Annie left the kitchen. Gaston grabbed a piece of paper and pencil. "What should your message say?" he asked Jack. "The unicorn is free. Nightfall, June 5th, said Jack. "The unicorn is free. Nightfall, June 5th, Gaston repeated as he wrote the message. "I like that," he said, nodding. "The unicorn is free. It sounds like very hopeful. It sounds like a message I would like to get about my son someday." "I'm sorry they disappeared," said Jack. "Yes," whispered Gaston. "As am I." Then he shook his head. "Well," his voice boomed, "it's wartime, and war is terrible for everyone, is it not?" "Yes, it is," said Jack. "Got everything," said Annie, returning with the kitchen. She was carrying their boots and Jack's field pack. "And here is a bit of food," said Suzette. She gave Annie a small stack. "Thanks, Annie." She put the sack of food into Jack's pack. Then she and Jack pulled on their boots. "It is 8:30 now," said Gaston, looking at his watch. "It will be dark at 8 o'clock tonight, so you have nearly 12 hours to find your friend." "Oh, we almost forgot to ask you," said Annie. She pulled out Kathleen's rhyme. "This is the message she sent about to look for her." She read aloud the third and fourth lines of the rhyme. 3 miles east of Sir Kay's grave, cross a river to find a cave. So we know we go to Caen first, said Jack, since that's where Sir Kay is buried. And then we'll head 3 miles east till over from and cross a river. The River Orne, said Suzette. Great, said Jack. And then we look for a cave. Yes, but there are many caves in the River Orne and Mondeville, said Gaston. Long ago, the mined limestone cliffs in the area creating tunnels and caverns. I wonder how we find the White Run, said Jack. I do not know, said Gaston, frowning. Here are the next lines, said Annie. She showed Gaston the message and read aloud. Look for knights and small round cows, a crack in the rock beneath the boughs. Knights, growled Gaston, what does your friend mean? Knights in armor? Knights in the Middle Ages? Annie shrugged. Small round cows, said Suzette. She shook her head. That doesn't make sense to me, nor to me, said Gaston. It's okay, we'll figure it out, said Annie. You've just been a big help telling us about the River Orne and the caves in Mondville. She put the notebook back into her pocket. Let's go, said Jack. He took his field pack from Annie and pulled it on. Come along, then, said Gaston. He held them out of the farmhouse into the chilly morning. The air smelled of wood smoke. The sky was overcast. Do you have money, said Suzette. Actually, no, said Jack. Gaston, said Suzette. Gaston reached into a pocket of his trousers and brought out a handful of coins. French francs for you, he said, handing out a handful of coins. He said, handing them to Jack. Thank you, said Jack, dropping the francs into his pocket. Gaston, well, they will need bicycles too, said Suzette. Yes, come along, said Gaston. They all followed him to the barn. Gaston stepped inside and came out a moment later carrying 2 bikes. You can ride these. They belonged to our 2 boys when they were younger. Just follow any road to the south, said Suzette, and you will come to Cannes. Keep to the back road, said Gaston. There are fewer motor cars on them. Which way south? Asked Annie. Wait, I will give you something to guide you. Suzette slipped back into the house and returned a moment later. Take these compasses. They belong to Tom and Theo. She handed a small silver compass to Annie. Then she gave Jack and Annie each a black flat cap. These berets belong to them too. Thank you, said Annie. When they put on the berets, Jack adjusted his to look like Gaston's. Suzette smiled. Good, now you look French. If you come to a checkpoint, said Gaston, ask very calm when you pass. If they stop you and ask you for papers, show them your identity cards. Do not give anyone the V sign to anyone unless you are certain the person is on our side. Many of our citizens do not belong to the resistance, Suzette explained. In these times, you never know who our friends and enemies are, growled Gaston, and that is why you must tell no one about the invasion tomorrow. We won't. We promise, said Annie. But I'll tell you guys something, said Jack. What is that? Said Gaston. Jack took a deep breath and then said, the invasion will be a success. Tom and Theo wrote the truth. France will gain back its freedom. Gaston gave him a crooked smile. Jack's right, said Annie. It might take time, but we know you'll be free. We know it for a fact. Some tears filled Gaston's eyes. He nodded briskly and then turned his face away. Thank you, children, for your kind words, said Suzette, putting an arm around Gaston. Ride south to the lane running past the farm. Gaston will send the message over the wireless. I hope your SOE contact receives it, and I hope you find your dear friend and take her back to England with you. Thanks, said Jack. Thanks for everything. Jack and Annie climbed into their bikes. They rode down the bumpy dirt path away from the farmhouse. When they came to the lane, Annie pulled out the compass. South, that way, she said, pointing to the right. Before they turned onto the lane, Jack and Annie looked back. The French couple was still watching them. Gaston held up 2 fingers in a V for victory sign. Jack and Annie each flashed the sign back to him. Then they turned into the lane and headed south. Chapter 7. Friends and Enemies. Jack and Annie rode their bikes with the wind at their backs. The spring air smelled of plowed soil and fresh cut hay. As their bikes wobbled down the dirt lane, they passed apple orchards, wheat fields, vineyards, and farmhouses. I can't believe it, Jack called back to Annie. That Allied invasion of Normandy. That was called D-Day. Have you ever heard of it? Yes, but I don't know exactly what it was, said Annie. I read a book about it, said Jack. It was one of the most important military events of all time. Over 100,000 soldiers landed in Normandy, France, to fight Hitler's army. It was the beginning of the end of World War II. I can't believe we came here on the day before D-Day. I hope everything doesn't get destroyed, said Annie. It's beautiful here. Yeah, it is, said Jack. The countryside looked like an old painting. Peach-colored farmhouses, apple trees with white flowers, red poppies blooming in the fields. Everything was so peaceful and lovely that Jack could hardly believe the Battle of D-Day would start here tomorrow. It gave him a strange feeling of what was going to happen. After bumping over ruts and ridges, Jack and Annie came to the end of a dirt lane. Annie checked the compass. "Left," she said. They turned left and pedaled down a wide, tall. It was impossible to see on. They turned left and pedaled down the wide road bordered with hedgerows. The hedges were so tall that it was impossible to see beyond them. "Are we going on a back road?" Annie asked. "I can't tell," said Jack. They hadn't gone much far when the motorcycle turned onto the road and headed their way. "Friend? Enemy?" Jack wondered anxiously. In case it was an enemy, he called back to Annie. "Act normal." "Right," said Annie. They both smiled broadly and steered their bike single file along the edge of the road. Jack was glad that Suzette had said wearing berets made them look French. When the motorcycle roared past, the driver didn't even look their way. The motorcycle disappeared in the distance, but then another car turned onto the road. As it headed toward them, Jack tried to look normal again. Just as the car passed, he glanced in its direction. To his amazement, a woman flashed a quick V's for Victory sign. Jack and Annie grinned and flashed the sign back. "Friend," he called back to Annie. The woman's V signal made him feel hopeful. Maybe this isn't going to be so hard, he thought. Coming up next was a horse-drawn cart in a driven by a young man who looked like a farmer. Seated beside him was a young teenage girl. When they saw Jack and Annie, they smiled and nodded. Definitely friend, Jack thought. When he got close to the couple, he flashed a quick V's for Victory sign. An angry look crossed the man's face. He cried out in alarm. He pulled his horse to a halt. He pointed to Jack and Annie. "Resistance! Carriers!" he shouted. Oh no, thought Jack. Gaston had been right. In these times you didn't really know who was your friend and who was your enemy. Behind the horse and cart, another motorcycle was rumbling down the road. The rider wore a gray uniform. The people on the cart flagged him down. "Go!" cried Jack. He and Annie wheeled around and raced their bikes against the wind. When Jack looked back, the motorcycle was coming at them fast. "Ditch the bikes!" Annie shouted. They skidded to a stop and dropped their bikes to the ground and bolted through the opening in the hedgerows. Scrapped by branches and thorns, they pushed their way through the narrow gap until they burst onto farmland. As they ran through the cow pasture, Jack looked around wildly for a place to hide. "Barn!" he cried, pointing. He and Annie ran to the word a red barn next to a silo. When they drew close to the entrance, they saw a man in white clothes putting 2 large milk cans into the back of a white truck. "Help!" cried Annie. The milkman looked startled, but when he saw the motorcycle crash through the hedge at the edge of the property, he seemed to understand at once. "Quick, get into the truck," he said. Jack and Annie scrambled into the truck and found a hiding place behind rows of tall milk canisters. Crouching behind the canisters, they covered their mouths so no one would hear them gasping for breath. The milkman slammed the door of the truck shut. There was a panel between the front seat and the windowless back area. Jack and Annie sat in the dark listening to the motorcycle thunder closer and closer, and then stopped. Then, through the closed door, they could hear bits of conversation. Yes, two, boy and girl. Resistance, carriers. Yes, you are, sir. Yes, good. Thank you for your help. Moments later, Jack heard the motorcycle rear up and drive away. The milkman started his engine, then, with the large canisters jiggling in their crates, the truck began bouncing over the road. I guess we're going with him, whispered Annie. I wonder if he's a friend or an enemy, whispered Jack. Friend, said Annie. He must have told the motorcycle guy that we went in the opposite direction, or he could be taking us to the police, whispered Jack. Maybe the motorcycle guy was thanking him for locking us in our truck and taking us to the Nazis. Oh, no, I hadn't thought of that, whispered Annie. Clutching their berets, they jiggled with the clattering milk cans, and the truck continued on. After a while, the milk truck stopped again. It sounded like the driver was getting out. Jack froze. He heard the back door handle click. Then the door swung open. The milkman pulled out a large milk canister and whispered, All clear, hurry. Thanks, said Annie. Leaving the door open, the milkman carried the canisters away from the truck. Go, said Jack. He and Annie jumped out of the back of the truck and parked. It was parked in front of a long building with a sign that said, Can Milk Processing Plant. Look, we're in Cannes, said Annie, pointing to the sign. Isn't that great? Go, go, said Jack. He and Annie raced across the street and headed down the narrow alley. Wait, said Jack, stopping in his tracks. We shouldn't run. It will make us look suspicious. They stopped for a moment to catch their breath. The milkman was a friend, said Annie. Definitely, said Jack. Okay, let's go. Act normal. Jack and Annie stepped out from the alley and onto a busy town square. In the middle of the square was an outdoor market. Women and children strolled from booth to booth, buying lettuce, peas, potatoes, flowers, linens, and lace. Surrounded the square was cobblestone streets lined with giant, quaint buildings. There was a church covered with ivy, a small train depot, and a sidewalk cafe with a red striped awning. Again, Jack found it difficult to believe that the Great Battle of D-Day was coming tomorrow. This is all going to change tomorrow, he said to Annie as they strolled through the market. I know, said Annie. I wish I could tell everyone to leave today. Yeah, said Jack. He looked at a clock tower in the square. It's almost 10. We have 10 hours left until nightfall. Well, we're in Cannes, said Annie. Now we have to go 3 miles east to a river Orne and the caves in Mondeville. Right, said Jack. Excuse me, Annie called to a young woman pushing a baby buggy. Can you please tell us how to get to Mondeville? It is very easy, said the woman. Just go a short train ride. You get off at the first stop. She pointed to the depot next to the cafe. Thanks, said Annie. You're welcome, said the woman. She waved 2 fingers and kept pushing the carriage across the square. Friend, Annie said to Jack. How do you know, said Jack. She gave me a V's for victory sign, said Annie. Or maybe he just waved with 2 fingers. Even though the milkman was a friend, and we don't know who our friends and enemies are. Remember the farmer and the farmer and the girl in the cart? Yeah, I didn't see that coming, said Annie. Not in a million years, said Jack. I thought, said Annie. The roar of engines interrupted her. 4 open black cars rolled onto the square and parked in a line. Each car had a red, white, and black symbol on the side. Jack recognized the swastika of the symbol for the Nazis. Soldiers got out of the cars and stood at the edge of the square watching the shoppers. They wore gray uniforms with black belts and tall boots. Enemies, Jack said under his breath. Definitely, said Annie. Chapter 8, The Train. With the arrival of the Nazis, the atmosphere in the square changed. Vendors fell silent. Shoppers lowered their heads and grabbed their hands of their children. "We should catch that train as soon as possible," said Jack. "You bet," said Annie. "Look normal." With their hands in their pockets, Jack and Annie walked as calmly as they could from the market toward the train depot. With quick steps, they crossed the street and entered the small station. "Tickets," Jack said to Annie. He headed to the ticket window and placed some coins in front of the ticket agent. "2 for Mondeville, please." The ticket agent counted out some coins and then gave Jack 2 tickets. "Thank you," said Jack. He and Annie stepped forward from the window and walked out to the tracks. Jack noticed that the waiting passengers were anxiously watching the scene on the edge of the station platform. Some Nazi soldiers had stopped an old man. The man's hands were up. He looked terrified, and the soldiers checked their pockets. "Don't look," said Jack. He grabbed Annie's hand so she wouldn't hurry to the man's aid. But he felt fury too. Why torment a whole old man? He wondered. He wanted to shout at the Nazis, "Leave us all alone!" But just like the other bystanders, he was too scared to do anything. He gripped Annie's hand tighter and pulled her in the other direction. "Come on." To Jack's relief, he heard the train whistle blow. Soon the train rounded the bend, puffing steam. The crowd stepped back as the black engine chugged into the station. It let out an eerie pierce shriek and jolted to a stop. Doors slid open and people stepped out onto the platform and headed for the station. "All aboard!" shouted the conductor, and the waiting passengers moved toward the tracks. Jack and Annie climbed up into the rear cars. "Where are our seats?" Annie asked Jack. "I don't know," said Jack. He looked at their tickets. "It says second class." "Excuse me, where are the second class seats?" Annie asked an old woman with a friendly face. "Follow me." The woman led them up the train corridor and stepped in front of the empty compartment. "You can sit there," she said, then continued on her way. Jack and Annie opened the glass door and stepped into a small space with floor seats. Jack pulled off his helmet and sat down next to Annie near the window. "I hate them," said Annie. Jack knew exactly who she meant. The whistle of the train jolted and began moving. Huff, huff, huff. It left the depot and chugged down the tracks away from the cane. "It's a short ride," said Annie. "Not sure enough," said Jack. "Listen." Even above the roar of the train, he could hear boots stomping over the corridor outside their compartment. "Ignore them," said Annie. "Got it," said Jack. "Oh, Jean, look, lovely trees." Annie pointed out the window. "Yes, Emmy, they are lovely," exclaimed Jack. "Remember?" Before he could finish, the door of the compartment slid open. 2 Nazi officials stood in the doorway. "Identity papers, please," one said. Jack's heart pounded, but he turned and faked a friendly smile. "Oh, yeah, sure," he said. He pulled out his identity card and showed them to the official. Annie smiled and showed her card, too. The soldier looked carefully at the cards and then handed them back. "Your bag now," he said to Jack, holding up his hand. "My pack, sure," said Jack. But before he could hand it over, Annie snatched it away from him. "Why not?" "Why do you want it?" she asked, the man grinning. "I need to look inside of it," said the official. "Really?" said Annie. "There's nothing interesting inside." Why is she doing this? Jack wondered. He couldn't think of anything in his pack that would get them in trouble. Just lunch and Jack's pencil and notebook with all the notes torn out. "Give it to me," demanded the official. Annie didn't move. Her smile had faded, returned by a place of fear. What is wrong with her? Jack wondered. He gently pried the field pack loose from her grip. "It's okay," he assured her. "He can look in it." Grinning crazily, he handed the bag over to the soldier. The Nazi unbuckled Jack's pack. He reached in and pulled out a small sack that Suzette had given them. He opened it and took out an apple, a chunk of cheese, and 2 pieces of black bread. He handed the food to the other official, then reached deeper into the field pack and pulled out some papers. Jack was confused. Where'd those come from? The soldier held up one of the papers. It was the flyers that Tom and Theo had printed. Hope and courage, freedom soon. The soldier put the papers back into his pack. Then he narrowed his eyes at Jack. So you are working for the other side, he said. What? No, said Jack. He looked at Annie. How? Sorry, Annie whispered. I want to help them, Tom and Theo. Stand up, the official barked at Jack. No, cried Annie, please. He didn't do anything. It was me. I did it. The Nazi pushed Annie aside. Boy, I am placing you under arrest, he said. But just as the man reached out to grab Jack, an explosion rocked the train. The sounds of screeching brakes split the air. The train ground to a sudden stop. Jack and Annie were thrown from their seats. The soldiers fell to their hands and knees. Passengers scrambled out of the corridor screaming and yelling. What happened? What happened? Resistance! Blown up tracks ahead. The 2 Nazis jumped to their feet. Ignoring Jack and Annie, they hurried away from the compartment. Jack looked out the window. A few hundred yards in front of the train, black smoke was rising into the air. Plan green, he said. Let's get out of here. He grabbed his field pack and started out of the compartment. But more soldiers were running down the corridor, shoving all the passengers aside. Annie grabbed Jack's arm. The window, she said. Climb out. Jack strangled the window ledge and swung his leg over the drop at the compartment below. He reached up and helped Annie drop to the ground too. Looking down the tracks, Jack saw train workers and soldiers running toward the billowing black smoke. Sirens were screaming. Passengers were fleeing from all the cars on the train. Come on, said Jack. He and Annie ran down the embankment toward the woods near the tracks. Then they took off through the brush, weaving around moss, trees, and pale spring ferns. They pushed twigs and vines, trying to get as far away from the train as possible. Are we heading in the right direction? Jack asked Annie, panting. Annie pulled out her compass and looked at it. Yes, southwest. Good, keep going, said Jack. They ran up till they came to the edge of the road. Up the road, a bridge crossed the wide river. A sign next to the bridge said River Orne. That's the river we want, cried Annie. Cross the river to find a cave. Perhaps, said Jack. He and Annie hurried down to the bridge and raced across it. On the other side was a small restaurant. A sign on the front said Sylvie's Bistro. Stop, said Jack, gasping. Before we go any farther, let's stop there and make a plan. Great, I'm dying of thirst, said Annie. They caught their breath. Then they straightened their berets, smiled fake smiles, and walked into the bistro. Inside the crowded dining room, the air smelled of coffee and carriages smoke. Jack and Annie slipped over to an empty table and sat down. I'm sorry, said Annie, leaning toward Jack. I didn't mean to get you in trouble. Before she could finish, a teenage waitress brought silverware and menus to their table. May I help you, sir? The girl asked him. For a moment, Jack just stared at the dark-haired, rosy-cheeked girl. He was still in daze from both being arrested and from the explosion. Can we have 2 lemonades, please? Annie asked. The waitress nodded and left. I'm so sorry, Annie whispered again to Jack. When I went down to the cellar to grab her stuff, I grabbed a bunch of the flyers and put them in your field pack. Why, said Jack, why would you do that? I thought while we were looking for Kathleen, we could do what Tom and Theo did, said Annie. You know, put up flyers when no one was looking. It seemed like a good... Okay, I get it, said Jack. But we can't worry about their mission now. We have our own mission. He reached into his backpack and pulled out the flyers. We have to get rid of these. If we don't... Jack, said Annie, looking over his shoulder. Jack turned around. The waitress was standing behind them with their lemonade. When she saw the flyers in Jack's hands, her eyes widened. Jack clutched the batch of papers to his chest. Without a word, the waitress put down their drinks and hurried to the kitchen at the back of the bistro. "We have to go," said Jack. She saw the flyers. He jammed the papers into his pack. "Wait," said Annie. "We can't," said Jack. "She's going to tell her boss. They'll call the police." Before Jack or Annie could stand up and leave, the waitress burst out of the kitchen with a tall, slender woman wearing an apron. The woman's heavy shoes clomped on the wooden floor, heading for Jack and Annie. "My mother wants to talk to you," said the waitress. "Oh no," thought Jack. The woman pulled up a chair and sat down. She leaned forward. "Tell me, please," she whispered. "How do you know Tom and Theo?" Chapter 9, Code Breakers. Jack and Annie stared in shock at the woman. Before they could answer, the door of the bistro swung open and 3 Nazi soldiers entered. The men ignored everyone as they sat down at the corner table not far from Jack and Annie. The young waitress quickly moved to serve them. "My name is Sylvie," the girl's mother said softly to Jack and Annie. "I am a friend of the twins, a very good friend." Jack was wary. Is she really a friend, he wondered. Annie did not seem to have the same doubt. "Oh, hi," she said in a low voice. We know their parents." "I have never met Tom and Theo's parents," said Sylvie. She glanced at the table in the corner. The Nazi soldiers were still laughing loudly with her daughter. "In the resistance, we keep our personal lives secret from each other. That's why a family might avoid punishment if one of us is caught." Do their parents know what happened to their sons?" "No, only that they were caught in Paris," said Annie. "They don't know if they were in prison or not." "Tom and Theo are not in prison. They are safe," said Sylvie. "With help from others, they had escaped jail and fled to south of France. Then they crossed the Pyrenees Mountains into Spain." "That's great," whispered Annie. Jack looked at the Nazi soldiers. They were still joking with Sylvie's daughter. Was there any chance Sylvie was working for them? What if it was a trap? Was she making up a story about Tom and Theo? "Is that true?" he asked, narrowing his eyes at Sylvie. "I understand your caution," whispered Sylvie. Then she slowly moved 2 spoons into the shape of a V. Jack nodded. Okay, he thought. He was willing to take the chance that Sylvie was telling the truth. Sylvie then straightened the spoons. "It is very dangerous for you to carry these flyers," she said under her breath. "I know, it's my fault," said Annie. "I wanted to help Tom and Theo. We got caught on a train and Jack almost got arrested, but then the tracks got blown up and we escaped." Sylvie smiled. "You are brave," she said. "In these times, even children must be brave." "But helping Tom and Theo isn't really our mission," said Annie. "We're trying to find a friend and help her escape to England." Jack glanced again at the corner table. The Nazis were studying their menus now. "Is there any way I can help you?" said Sylvie. "Yes," said Annie. She slipped Kathleen's rhyme out of her back pocket and put it on the table. "Our friends sent this message in a code." Sylvie discreetly looked at the note. "The only lines we don't understand are the last ones." Jack glanced at the soldiers again. One of them looked at her gaze rested on Sylvie. "They're looking at you," he whispered. Sylvie nodded, then laughed. "So you both love apples," she said. What is she talking about? Jack wondered. Is she speaking the code? "Yes, we love apples," said Annie, smiling. "What kind of apples do you like best?" said Sylvie. I like Granny Smith's apples," said Annie. "So does Jack." Good, said Sylvie. "Well, we have very good, delicious varieties of apples in this area. They have very funny names, such as the Gentle Bishop and the Skinny as a Dog. But my favorites are the Yellow Knights and the White Cows." Jack didn't know what to say. He wasn't sure how to play this game. Annie looked calmly at Jack. Yellow night, she said, and small round cows. Oh, said Jack. Apples. In a note, Kathleen was secretly writing about apples. Not knights, not cows. Annie laughed. And can we find these delicious varieties of apples somewhere near here? She asked. Oh, yes, said Sylvie. In fact, my bistro is on the road of rocks. Down the street is a desert chatty with a small orchard. Beautiful yellow nights and white calves grow on trees there. So perhaps that is where you will find what you're looking for. She casually tapped the note. Jack saw that her finger was pointing to a crack in the rock beneath the boughs. Cool, said Jack. Thank you. You're most welcome, said Sylvie. She stood up and straightened her apron. Enjoy your day, children. I hope you find the apple of your dreams. With your help, I think we will, said Jack. He glanced at the Nazi. The soldier was no longer looking at their table. He was lighting a cigarette and listening to his friends. Jack flashed a quick V's for victory sign at Sylvie. She smiled, then crossed the dining room back to the kitchen. Friend, Annie said to Jack as she put the note back into her pocket. Big time, said Jack. He checked the clock on the wall. It's almost 2. We have 6 hours left. He took a long sip of lemonade, left some money on the table, and stood up. As he and Annie quietly slipped out of the bistro, he heard Nazis laughing with each other. It was still cloudy outside. A damp wind was blowing. This is the road of rocks, said Annie, looking at the sign. Now we just need to find a deserted chateau. What's a chateau? I think it's like a big fancy house, said Jack. Cool, said Annie. Let's find it. Oh, wait, said Jack. We have to do something first. What, said Annie. Come with me, said Jack. He led the way around the bistro and opened to the back window. Through the window, he saw Sylvie in the kitchen. She was stirring a pot on the stove. Jack looked through the window to make sure no one was looking. Then he called out in a loud whisper, Sylvie! She looked back and came over to the window. Yes, she said. Could you do a favor for me, said Jack. Could you send a wireless message to the BBC? She nodded. Could it say, Jack thought for a moment, have it say, your twin unicorns are free in Spain? Sylvie looked puzzled. Tom and Theo, said Jack. Their parents will understand what that means when they hear it over the wireless. It will make them very happy. Yes, said Sylvie, I will do that. Thanks, said Jack. Good work, said Annie as she and Jack slipped back around the restaurant. Yep, said Jack. Now a deserted chateau with apple trees. Onward, said Annie. As they started up the road of rocks, Jack and Annie strolled past a couple of houses, churchyards, and an ancient-looking cemetery. They passed a bunch of shop and bookstores and a bakery called a La Baguette. I don't get it, said Jack. Why would Kathleen be hiding in a cave? It seems so safe and open out here, doesn't it? Why didn't she come out in the open? I was wondering the same thing, Stanley. And didn't she tell Teddy when and where to pick her up? And then go to that place and meet him. You have to be cautious, but you can still move around. Something's not right. Yeah, really, said Jack. He and Annie walked farther down the road of rocks and a bend. Whoa, said Jack. A deserted chateau? Set against a rock hillside was a mansion with a saggy roof and broken down windows. On its grounds was a fallen down shed, overgrown gardens, and a scattered of bushes and weeds. Annie pointed to a cluster of flowers, trees in the front of the hillside. Apple orchard, she said. The spring breeze shook their boughs and white petals floated to the ground like snowflakes. Yes, said Jack. Now we look around. No vehicles or pedestrians were close by. Trespass. Jack and Annie walked by the driveway. Their boots crunched over the gravel path as they hurried across the weedy ground of the chateau. When they drew close to the hillside, they studied the rocks. "There," said Annie. She pointed to a big crack enough for a person to slide through. "Okay," said Jack. "Wait." He reached into his pack and pulled out his flashlight Teddy had given them. "I'll go first," said Annie. She squeezed through the shoulder-wide crack in the rock, and Jack followed her. They stepped onto a tunnel lit only by the shaft of light coming from the their flashlight. Jack switched on their flashlight and shined it on the cream-colored stone walls. "There must be one of the limestone tunnels that Suzette had talked about," said he said. "Listen," said Annie. Voices were singing deep in the tunnel. High, sweet voices. "Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are." Chapter 10, Hideout. "What's going on?" Jack whispered. "Let's find out," said Annie. Jack turned off the flashlight. The sound of the singing guided their way as they tiptoed through the cave sloping tunnel into the cavern. Across the cavern, candles flickered in a corner. The candles shone on a group of small children sitting with a teenage girl. Most of the children were no more than 3 or 4 years old. They sat on a pile of blankets facing the girl as she sang with them. "Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are." The children's bell-like voices are beautiful, thought Jack. "When the blazing sun is gone, when nothing shines upon, then you show your little light, twinkle, twinkle all the night." Jack and Annie waited until the children had finished their song. Then Annie called, "Kathleen!" All the children turned to look. Kathleen let out a cry and hurried across the cavern into Annie's arms. Then she grabbed Jack and hugged him too. The enchantress wiped tears from her sea blue eyes. Her tangled curly hair was dirty and tangled. She looked tired and thin. "I'm so glad to see you." "But what are you doing here?" she said. "Where's Teddy?" "Teddy sent us instead," said Jack, "because he thought we could decipher your code. Plus, he had to save down Aram in Holland and Belgium," said Annie. "What happened to you? Who are all these kids?" By now, the children were tugging on Jack and Annie's overalls, shouting, "Hello, who are you? What are your names?" They wore ragged clothes and no shoes, but their small, pale, open faces were trusting. "Are you taking care of all these kids?" Annie asked Kathleen. "Yes, I have 2 wonderful helpers, Sarah and her sister Sophie," said Kathleen. She pointed to the tallest children in the group. The sisters looked about 7 and 6 years old. Their dark eyes were shining. They smiled shyly at Jack and Annie. "These are my friends, Jack and Annie," Kathleen said to the children. "They have come a very long way to help us." Jack and Annie meet Sally, Etty, Daniel, Eli. Kathleen pointed to each tiny children as she said their names. Perry, Leo, Marcella, and Ella. Talking over her, the children asked questions all at once. "Who are you? Can you stay with us? Where do you live?" Children, Kathleen said in a calm voice. "Hush, please. Go back to your blankets now with Sophie and Sarah and rest with Jack and Annie. You can play with Jack and Annie when you awake." The children did as Kathleen said, still chatting though more softly. They followed the older girls back to their blankets. Sophie and Sarah seemed to grown up as they tried to settle the children down. "Have you been living in this cave for a long time?" asked Annie. "This is our hideout during the day," said Kathleen. "After dark, I sneak them into the empty chateau, and we hide in the attic there. The plumbing still works, and there's a fresh well of water. I found a supply of candles, thank goodness." Sophie and Sarah looked very capable. They watched the others at night while I looked for food. I visit gardens and gather old bread from behind the bakery. Before daylight, I lead the children back here. We sing and play games and nap and talk. I do not think they realize we are in hiding. "Why do you have to hide them?" Jack asked. To keep them safe from the Nazis, said Kathleen. My assignment with the SOE was to find Sophie and Sarah and Norm the orphanage and sneak them into England. The parents had already escaped prison and already made their own way to London. Why were their mom and dad in prison? Asked Annie. The parents were brilliant scientists. They both were arrested and terrorized by the Nazis. That they were Jewish, said Kathleen. That's crazy, said Annie. Yeah, said Jack. Yes, it is, said Kathleen. When I arrived in Normandy, I found that the orphanage had been abandoned, but there were still children there. So Sophie and Sarah were taking care of them the best they could. Because they were Jewish, I needed to hide them. Oh man, said Jack. He didn't understand why the Nazis hated Jewish people so much. He'd read about it and seen movies about it, but he never understood it. There were too many for me to get them out to safety, said Kathleen. That is why I sent word to Teddy that I need magic. I wanted to make them invisible or something to fly. If only I could turn them into little birds, I thought. And they could fly across the channel and come themselves. Right, said Annie, smiling. Like when you once turned us into seals off the coast of Ireland. Exactly like that, said Kathleen. Well, why do you need magic from Teddy? Asked Jack. What happened to your own powers? I do not know, said Kathleen. Kathleen shook her head. I seem to have lost power myself here. I fear that sadness and worry have drained me from my ability to perform magic. Perhaps being terrified for the children. She shook her head again. But you have brought help. Yes, the wand. Jack took a deep breath. Actually, no, we didn't, he answered. No magic, only ourselves. Kathleen looked confused. But in my message, I know, said Annie. Teddy meant to give us the wand of the Anthus, but he forgot. He was flying the plane and helping us learn how to parachute, and somehow he forgot, and we forgot too. I remember just as we were about to jump out of the plane, but then it was too late. He forgot? I can't believe it. How could he? Kathleen's voice trembled. Oh, that is so terrible. Only magic can help these children escape harm. We can't leave France. We're trapped. You have to leave, said Jack. We all have to leave France by nightfall. A giant military invasion is starting tomorrow. It's called D-Day invasion. We heard that many bombs will drop over this whole area. Kathleen shook her head. No, I don't know how we can leave. No, it is not possible, she stammered. Jack couldn't believe how much Kathleen had changed, from a more joyful, confident person to someone much more worried and fragile. He found his own confidence starting to fail. I don't know what he can do, he said, looking at Annie. Well, I know, said Annie. I know what to do. We're going to get all these children and ourselves out of France. We have skills. What skills, said Jack. Skills, you said yourself. Remember the ditch, said Annie. Jack couldn't think of a single skill that would help their situation. Don't worry, said Annie. We have courage, we have hope, and we have each other. So let's make a plan. Jack just stared at her. Annie went on. First of all, she said, with all these kids, we won't be able to fit in Teddy's little pet plane. She turned to Kathleen. We already sent a message to him telling him to pick us up after nightfall at the same spot where he dropped us off. So now we just have to send a message telling him to bring a bigger plane. Sylvia, the bistro can do that, said Jack. Annie's confident was lifting his spirits too. Good idea, said Annie. Next we have to figure out how to get from back here from the drop zone. That's the hard part, said Jack. We need a truck or something, like the milk truck that took us to Cannes. Right, said Annie, so the kids can have it in the back. Kathleen's face lit up. Oh, every night I go to the bakery up the street after it closes, she said. There is always a delivery truck parked in the driveway. It is never locked. I know this because I gather scraps of bread from the back. Okay, said Jack, but there's only one problem. If we borrow the truck, who's going to drive it? You, silly, said Annie. Me, said Jack. Yes, you, Annie turned to Kathleen. Jack's not old enough to have a license, but he learned how to drive an old truck in our great-grandfather's farm. He's only allowed to drive around in the pastures, but he's old enough to drive. That's one of his skills. No, Annie, said Annie. Yes, no, said Jack. Yes, said Annie. So all we have to do is gather the kids. Us use the truck to get back to the drop zone and wait for Teddy to pick us, get a bigger plane, get everybody on board, and we'll all be out of France by nightfall. Fantastic, said Kathleen. We have a plan. Chapter 11. The Plan. Kathleen's blue eyes were sparkling. I'll go tell Sultan and Sarah to get the children ready. She hurried across the cavern. Jack whirled around to Annie. No, 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 he whispered. This is not a good plan. Yes, it is. You drove Great-Granddad's truck perfectly around the field just 2 weeks ago. I was there. I wanted to drive it too, but I couldn't reach the pedals. But that, said Jack, you didn't even need a key with that old truck, said Annie. Remember, you just turned the starter switch. You learned how to use the clutch and the gear shift. You drove us around and around in the hour for hours. You always say you can't wait to drive that truck again, but this is so different, said Jack. It's not that different, said Annie. Are you crazy? It's totally different, said Jack. Stealing a truck loading with tiny kids and driving through a foreign country to try to escape Nazis in World War II, it's totally different. Driving in a circle in our great-granddad's pasture. Okay, it's different, said Annie. Thank you, said Jack. It's different because lives are at stake here, said Annie. And that's why you have to do it. Before Jack could say anything, Kathleen was back. She was holding a candle and a folded map. What was your location of your drop zone? She asked. It's a field in Beeville next to a church, said Annie. 6 miles northwest of Cannes. Good, said Kathleen. I have on the map that the SOE gave me. It will help us. Let's go get the truck. By the light of her lantern, she led the way out of the cavern and through the limestone tunnel. Jack's heart was racing. Annie was right. Lives were at stake, but he was already sweating, and they hadn't even started their plan yet. How would he feel when he was trying to sneak a truckload of Jewish orphans past Nazi soldiers? Jack and Annie followed Kathleen through a tunnel to the crack in the rock. Then they walked into the gray light of the afternoon. The wind blew softly over the grounds of the chateau as they headed down the driveway. Let's refine our plan, said Kathleen. She sounded more like her old self. Sophie and Sarah will get the children ready. Annie will go to Sylvie at the bistro and ask her to send a new message to Teddy. Jack and I will pick up the bakery truck. Then we will all meet back here and load the children and head for the drop zone. Got it, said Annie. Jack nodded. He was relieved that Kathleen seemed much stronger. He hoped it meant that her magic skills would soon return. Right now they thought they really needed magic. When they came to the road, Kathleen turned to Annie. You go to Sylvie at the bistro, she said. So we will not look like as if we were traveling in groups. The Nazis do not like groups. Okay, meet you guys there, said Annie. Good luck. She started walking up the road of rocks toward Sylvie's bistro. Jack took a deep breath as he and Kathleen stood together waiting for Annie to get a good distance away. He felt shy when he was alone with the beautiful enchantress. Jack, these have been the 2 worst weeks of my life, Kathleen said, breaking the silence. I knew it was possible I could be responsible for the loss of 10 children. I felt helpless and sad and angry all at once. I've never felt that way. You're not hopeless, Kathleen, said Jack. You're strong and you're good. That's why you felt angry and sad. Thank you, Jack, she said. I am very, very relieved that you and Annie came to help. We haven't done anything yet, said Jack. But you will, she said. I admire you very much. She looked up the road of rocks. Annie is far enough ahead. I think we can go. Jack straightened his shoulders as he and Kathleen walked together up the road of rocks. He was ready to drive the truck. In fact, he was ready to do anything worthy of Kathleen. The bakery was closed when they got there. No one was on the sidewalks. The delivery truck should be at the back, said Kathleen. Come with me. She and Jack slipped behind the building. An old-fashioned cream-colored truck was parked behind the bakery. The cab of the truck looked just like the cab of Jack's great-grandfather's truck, but the back was different, though. His great-grandfather's truck was a pickup, but this truck was box-shaped like a van. The words La Baguette were painted on the side. Jack looked at the bakery truck. He took a deep breath. Okay, this should work, he said, trying to sound calm. Let's see how she looks inside. He pulled on the handle to the cab and the door swung open. Jack stuck his head inside and the truck had a keyless starter switch, just like his great-grandfather's truck. He turned back to Kathleen. Well, we're in business, he said. Wonderful, said Kathleen. Do you have a piece of paper so I can leave a message for the baker? Jack reached into his pack and pulled out his notebook and pencil. She wrote on a blank page. Thank you for letting us borrow your truck. It is waiting for you near the church of Beeville. She tore the notebook paper out of Jack's notebook, folded it, and slid it under the door. Then they both climbed into the front seat. Good to go? Jack asked, smiling. Yes, said Kathleen, smiling. Good to go. Jack looked at the floor and found the clutch pedal on the left, the brake in the middle, and the grandfather's truck. He put his hand on the gear shift next to his seat. Everything felt familiar. Okie dokie, he said. Let's get this show on the road. Jack pressed the brake with his foot and then pushed the clutch pedal down with his left. He moved the gear shift into neutral, then he turned the starter switch and the engine rumbled to life. Jack shifted into first gear. He moved his right foot off the brake and pressed the gas pedal. The truck engine roared. Jack took his foot off the clutch. The truck jerked forward and the engine stopped dead. No problem, said Jack. I'll just take me a minute to get the hang of it again. Jack repeated everything he had done. Brake, clutch, gear shift into neutral, starters, gear shift into first. This time he operated the clutch and the pedal perfectly, and the bakery truck rumbled smoothly down the road of rocks. Brilliant, said Kathleen. We are on our way. As Jack headed up the street, he kept all his attention on driving, not daring to think of their plan. Instead, he imagined he was just driving around his great-grandfather's pasture. When the truck came to the old chateau, Annie was heading into the driveway. Seeing Jack behind the wheel, she jumped up and down as if she was crossing a finish line. Jack and Kathleen laughed as Annie ran alongside the truck, waving her arms. Jack brought the bakery truck to a stop near the hillside. He and Kathleen climbed out. You did it, Annie asked Jack. Jack shrugged as if it was no big deal. Wait here, I will get the children, said Kathleen. Sophie and Sarah should have them ready by now. She dashed to the rocks. Was it hard to drive, Annie asked Jack. Not once I got it going, said Jack. It all kind of came back to me. Did you give Sylvie the message? Yes, I snuck around the back of the bistro and tapped on the window again, said Annie. I asked her to send another message, one that said, Unicorn has 10 coats, need bigger bird. Good work, said Jack. Here they are, said Annie. Kathleen, Sophie, and Sarah led the small children out of the tunnel. Excited to go for a ride, the little kids raced across the grass to the bakery truck. Jack got out and swung open the rear door. Then he, Annie, and Kathleen lifted each children into the back. Is everyone here? Called Kathleen. She called out each of their names to make sure. Ella, Eli, Leo, Daniel. As each high voice rang out, yes, Jack climbed into the driver's seat. Soon Kathleen and Annie joined him. Jack could hear the children chattering behind the patron that separated the cab from the back. They're so excited, said Kathleen. It smells like bread back there, said Annie. The children found lots of old crust to eat. Really, said Jack. He could hear their voices saying, this is good. I love it. It's so hard to chew. Yes, but this is very good. Jack's throat tightened. He wanted to do one thing in the world now, to help these little children escape France. Chapter 12, Checkpoint. Kathleen opened the map of the Cannes area and showed it to Annie. Mondeville, said Annie, pointing, and Beerville. It looks like they're about 7 miles to go. All set, said Jack. He took a deep breath. He started the truck, shifting into first gear, then drove down the driveway toward the road. Turn right, said Kathleen, studying the map. Jack turned right. He drove faster and shifted gears as they moved up the quiet road of rocks. Left onto St. Cloud Street, said Kathleen, then right onto Clope. Jack followed Kathleen's directions. Right onto Coburg, said Annie, then a quick left. Jack turned onto Coburg, then a quick left, and landed in the middle of a traffic jam. Oh no, Kathleen said quietly. Up the road, Nazi soldiers were stopping traffic. 2 Nazi held up spotlights and vehicles crawled toward them. What's going on? Asked Annie. It's a checkpoint, said Kathleen. Jack stopped breathing. What does that mean? He asked. It means officials randomly stop vehicles and check identities, said Kathleen. The soldiers waved one car through, but they stopped the next. Traffic came to a halt as the Nazi official shined a light into the car that had stopped. Oh man, thought Jack. When he saw another Nazi inspect the car's trunk, he started to panic. He was terrified that the soldiers would stop them too and look in the back of the bakery. Tell the kids to be quiet, said Jack. Kathleen tapped on the partition. Quiet, please, children. You must be very quiet now. Not one word. The children were silent. Jack gripped the steering wheel and tried to stop his hand from shaking. Jack, you have to look calm, said Kathleen. You must look as if you deliver this truck every day to deliver bread. Yeah, like it's no big deal, said Annie. I don't think I can do that, said Jack in a strangled voice. You have to, said Annie. Wait a moment, said Kathleen. She closed her eyes and then opened them again. Oh my, what is it, said Jack. I just recalled a spell that will keep us safe. Really, said Jack. Yes, since being with you and Annie, I have grown more hopeful. I think that feeling of hope is bringing back some of my magic, said Kathleen. That's wonderful, said Annie. What's the spell you remember? It is a spell that makes us invisible, said Kathleen. Really, said Jack? Yes, drive on, Jack, said Kathleen. The cars had started moving again. Do not look to either side, stare straight ahead. As Jack shifted from neutral into first gear and then second, Kathleen closed her eyes and whispered around. Powers of goodness, powers of light, shield us now from powers of sight. When Kathleen started to repeat the rhyme, Annie closed her eyes and joined in. Powers of goodness, powers of light, shield us now from powers of sight. Holding the steering wheel and pointing straight ahead, and Jack drove toward the checkpoint. Powers of goodness, powers of light, shield us now from powers of sight. Kathleen opened her eyes and looked round. That works, she whispered. We're invisible. We are, said Jack. How do you know? The Nazis are completely ignoring us, said Kathleen. They see nothing but empty space between the car in front of us and the car behind us. When it is our turn to pass the checkpoint, be calm and drive straight through. Jack relaxed a little as he imagined being invisible. Kathleen whispered the magic spell again. Powers of goodness, powers of light, shield us now from powers of sight. The soldiers waved at the driver of the green car ahead of the bakery truck, giving permission for it to go on. Good, said Kathleen. Now just follow closely behind that car and we will be fine. Jack fixed his eyes on the back of the green car, following it. Then he drove steadily and calmly past the checkpoint. When he glanced at his rear view mirror, he saw the soldiers were paying no attention to the bakery truck. He had no doubt that Kathleen's magic was working. They were definitely invisible. Drive on, Jack, said Kathleen. Jack drove on. When he looked in his rear-view mirror again, he saw that the soldiers stopped the car behind them. We made it, said Annie. Yes, said Kathleen, looking at the map. Turn left here, Jack, then an immediate right and follow the sign to St. Clair. Jack did as Kathleen said. He turned left, then right, and then pressed harder on the gas pedal. The road was empty. He drove faster and faster, shifting into third gear. In the fading light of dusk, the truck glided along the smooth road. Yay, said Annie. I think we'll make it by nightfall. Jack said nothing. He was afraid to break the spell of invisibility. When you see a sign for Beeville, turn right, said Kathleen. Jack nodded and kept driving. Beeville, said Annie. Jack turned right. Church, said Annie. The white steeple of the church was rising into the darkening sky. Next to the church was the drop zone, the empty field where they had landed with their parachutes. That's where Teddy will pick us up, said Annie. Good. Drive to the back of that church, said Kathleen, so the truck could not be seen. How can the truck be seen from anywhere? Jack wondered. Has Kathleen undone the spell? He pulled off the road and bumped over the grass to the back of the church. When they brought the truck to a stop and switched off the engine, Kathleen and Annie clapped. We're here, we made it, said Annie. You were brilliant, Jack, said Kathleen. Oh no, you get the credit, said Jack. I never could have done it without your magic. Yes, you could have, said Kathleen. In fact, you did. What? Said Jack. Jack, I fear I did not tell you the truth, said Kathleen. I still do not have magic powers. I did not make us invisible. You didn't, said Annie. No, said Kathleen. I knew that as long as Jack felt confident, an ordinary bakery truck would not draw the attention of the Nazis. I thought sure we could slip safely by. Oh, brother, said Jack. He took a deep breath. He didn't know whether to be angry with Kathleen or amazed at himself. In his confusion, he just laughed. Annie and Kathleen joined in. Well, at least our scariest part of our mission is over, he thought. Kathleen, Jack, and Annie climbed out of the cab. The countryside was quiet. No vehicles were in sight, and no dogs were barking. The moon was on the horizon. I hope Teddy received our messages from Sylvie and Gaston, said Jack, or else we'll be stranded here during the D-Day invasion. Tell me, what is the D-Day invasion, said Kathleen. Sometime after midnight, 100,000 soldiers will invade by sea and air and drive out the Nazis out of France, said Jack. It will be the beginning of the end of World War II. That is good, very good, breathed Kathleen. All the world is living a great nightmare now. When it wakes, everybody will wonder how this could have happened, and I fear no one will know the answer. She shook her head. Well, what do you think we should do now? I think we maybe should go do a better job of hiding the truck, said Jack. You and I can move it out down the road, said Annie. While you do that, I will hide the children in the church, said Kathleen. Good plan, said Jack. We'll help you get them inside. Kathleen, Jack, and Annie walked to the rear of the truck. Kathleen opened the door. They found the children sprawled around the floor fast asleep. Everyone, including Sophie and Sarah. Sophie and Sarah had even closed their eyes. Wake up, birdies, wake up, sang Kathleen. Wake up. Her sweet voice rose the children from sleep. They began to stir. Some reached out and grabbed their arms around Jack Annie and Kathleen. Jack gently lifted Leo and Eli out of the back of the truck. Then he clutched their hands and walked with them across the grass. "Let's go inside this peaceful building," he said. "It's peaceful in there." "Is this our new home?" Leo asked, rubbing his eyes. "Can you live with us?" said Eli. Jack led his 2 sleepy 3-year-olds into the church, while Annie, Kathleen, Sophie, and Sarah shepherded the others after him. Inside the dark front of the entrance, there smelled of old wood and incense. That last live day shone through the stained glass windows. After Jack, Annie, and Kathleen got everyone settled in the front pew, Kathleen started to lead the children in song. "Let's move the truck," Jack said to Annie. She nodded. As they slipped down the aisle and out of the church, they heard, "Are you sleeping? Are you sleeping? Brother John, Brother John, morning bells are ringing, morning bells are ringing, ding dong ding, ding dong ding." Chapter 13, Searchlights. Now it was falling fast as Jack and Annie climbed back into the bakery truck. "We shouldn't drive far," said Jack. Kathleen left a note for the bakery to tell him to look for his truck near the church in Beeville. "I hope he's still alive tomorrow and comes back to get it." "You hope he's still alive tomorrow?" said Annie. "That sounds terrible." "I know," said Jack. "War is terrible." He started the truck and they bumped over the grass to the road. Jack drove about 100 yards. Then they pulled off the road and parked the bakery truck beside the clump of trees. "I think this should do it," he said. Annie hopped out of the truck. Jack switched off the motor and rolled up his window. Then he climbed out too. "Let's hurry." "Look, Jack." Annie sounded scared. "Look up." Jack looked up. 2 giant beams of light were sweeping across the sky, crisscrossing each other. "What's going on?" asked Annie. "Those lights must be looking for planes to shoot down," said Jack. "Oh no," said Annie. "What if they spot Teddy's plane?" Jack didn't know how to answer. Maybe the worst isn't over yet, he thought. "Let's hurry back to the baker and tell Kathleen," he said. Jack and Annie ran up the road to the church. Inside they found Kathleen still singing with the children. "Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream." "A plane isn't going to work," he thought. He felt sure that the Nazis would spot Teddy's plane and shoot it down before he could land. "Kathleen," Annie called. Kathleen told the children to keep singing. Then she hurried over to Jack and Annie. "What's wrong?" she asked. "The Nazis are using searchlights to spot planes," said Jack. "They're sure to see Teddy's." "So only," said Kathleen. Jack and Annie led Kathleen outside. The lights were still sweeping across the night sky. "See," said Jack, pointing to the moving beams of light. "How could Teddy possibly?" Annie gasped. "Look," she said. "Look at the field." Below the dazzling searchlights, a silver plane sat in the dark field. The gleaming plane was much bigger than a spy taxi. It had a snub-nosed cockpit and a row of windows, and 4 huge propellers, 2 on each wing. "Where did that come from?" said Kathleen. "I don't know," said Jack, stunned. "I didn't see it land when we moved the truck. Or when we were coming back. I didn't hear it fly overhead or land or anything." The rear door of the plane swung open. Silhouetted in the doorway was a person in a flight suit and helmet. "Teddy!" said Annie. "Oh!" cried Kathleen. She dashed across the dark field. Jack and Annie ran after her. When Kathleen reached Teddy, she threw her arms around him and they all hugged. Jack and Annie piled on and they all hugged him at the same time. Everyone was laughing. "I'm so glad you got our messages," said Annie. "So am I," said Teddy. "Did you know the D-Day invasion is tomorrow?" said Jack. "Yes, I found out today," said Teddy. "With all the preparation for the invasion, I had trouble finding a big enough plane to come for you. But finally I was able to call upon a friend to help me." "Great," said Annie. "How did your plane land without the searchlight spotting it?" said Jack. "And why didn't it make any noise?" "I'll explain later," said Teddy. We must act quickly. You have others with you, no? Oh, yes, lots of others, said Annie. This way, said Kathleen. She grabbed Teddy's hand and pulled him up toward the church. Kathleen rescued 10 little kids from an abandoned orphanage, said Annie. That's why she couldn't get out of France, said Jack. Oh, no, Teddy whirled around to Kathleen. I should have come myself to help you. Do not worry, said Kathleen. Jack and Annie have given me miraculous help, and even without magic, I have lost my powers, Teddy. I gathered that from your message, said Teddy, and that's why I sent the wand of the sand. He stopped and smacked his forehead. Oh, no, I forgot, didn't I? You did, said Jack, but it's not all your fault. Annie and I forgot too until I was just about to jump out of the plane, but then it was too late. I'm so sorry, said Teddy. It's okay, Stanley. You had a lot on your mind. No, it's unforgivable, said Teddy. Seriously, it's okay, said Jack. We managed. By the time they had arrived at the door of the church, get ready to be bombed by little kids, said Annie to Teddy. Kathleen led the way inside. Sophie and Sarah were leaving. Led by the two sisters, all the children clambered toward the door of the church. They gathered around Teddy asking questions. Hush, children. Hush now, said Kathleen. Everyone grabbed someone's hand. Eddie, take Sophie's hand. Daniel, take Sarah's hand. Leo and Eli, Jack's hands. Marcella and Ella, Annie's hands. Pierre and Solly, Teddy's hands. Come along now. Follow me. We are about to go on a great adventure. With little hands tucked into bigger hands, everyone followed Kathleen out of the church into the field. Oh, look, said Leo. Pretty plane, said Eli. Yes, said Jack, walking with the two boys. Let's run. We're going to fly through the air on the Silver Bird. Gripping their hands, he ran with little steps so the kids could keep up. When they reached the plane, Teddy took charge. Big kids help small kids up the step ladder, he said. Kathleen lifted two preschoolers up the rear door, and he climbed up with two more. Sophie and Sarah each helped a smaller child. Jack held on to Leo and Eli and held them up the stairs. Boarding last, Teddy squeezed into the passenger's cabin with Pierre and Solly. Then he closed the heavy door and latched it. Sit down, relax, everybody, he said. We don't have far to go. The little kids laughed and squealed as they scrambled into the seats. Some of them jumped onto Kathleen and Annie's lap. Others climbed around Teddy and all chirped at once. Wait a minute, said Jack. Teddy, aren't you going to go up to the cockpit to fly the plane? No, as I said, I called upon a friend to help me, he said. He's the pilot. Oh, said Jack. But how did he land without hearing him? And how did he get past the searchlights? Explanations later, said Teddy. I think we're about to take off. He said something else, but his voice was drowned out by the kids still asking questions. Where are we going? Who are you? Is Kathleen your sister? As Kathleen and Teddy laughed and tried to answer the children, Jack thought Kathleen was her old self again. Her eyes were bright. Her laughter was lighthearted. Jack looked out at the window. The searchlights were still coming the dark and the incoming planes. So how did the SOE pilot land the plane, he wondered. How will he take off without being seen? The large silver plane started moving. It moved across the grass with no bumping, running, or engine sounds. No whirling, roaring, or rumbling. That's so weird, said Jack. Did they make super silent spy planes in World War II? He would have to take notes, he thought. But before he knew that the plane had lifted off the ground and he was gliding through the night with no vibrations, rocking, or shaking. Can we open a window? Asked Annie. No, silly, not on a plane, said Jack. Oh, but this plane you can open windows, said Teddy. He leaned over and undid the latch, pushed open the glass. As cool air rushed inside the cabin, Annie grabbed Jack's field pack. Without a word, she pulled out the flyers made by the resistance fighters, Tam and Theo. She showed the printing set to Teddy and Kathleen. They both grinned and nodded. Then, one at a time, Annie released the flyers out the open window. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 sheets of paper flapped into the moonlight night. That's all, said Annie. I wish I had more. Kathleen stood up at Annie for a moment. Then she smiled and rose from her seat. She pointed her finger at the flyers fluttering toward the earth below. She whispered words. And Salang Ken Daral Adu. Annie's wish shall now come true. Through the window, Jack saw the flyers began to multiply from 10 to 100, from 100 to 1,000, from 1,000 to 10,000. Everyone gasped and clapped. Kathleen's magic was working. Now that she was with Teddy, now that she was flying home to England, now that she was saving the children, her joy, her magic had returned. As the plane crossed the English Channel, the flyers kept multiplying across the sea. With the petals falling from apple trees, the sheets of paper tumbled and swirled through the air. Tom and Theo's message filled the night sky, gleaming with their bright words. Hope and courage. Freedom soon. Chapter 14. The Pilot. Soon after the silver plane crossed the English Channel, it landed silently in a field near the Glastonbury Tor. Teddy opened the rear door and lowered the stepladder. Everyone out, he said. Once again, a big kids helped the little kids. Everyone climbed down the ladder and stepped onto the dark, dewy grass. The moon was high in the sky now. Jack could hardly believe that he and Annie had been away from America and home for 24 hours. That's why it was arranged to take everyone to London, Teddy said to Kathleen. Motor cars are waiting in the parking lot. This way. As Teddy led the group toward the parking lot, Annie carried Daniel and Eddie. Jack carried Leo and Eli. Where are we going? Eli asked him. To a safe city, answered Jack. You'll live in a nice home soon, I promise. The small boy kissed Jack on the cheek. Then Leo kissed Jack too. Jack just laughed. You guys are funny, he said. Is Jack your brother? Eddie asked Annie. Yes, said Annie. He's my brother. Is he the best brother in the world? Asked the tiny girl. Yes, he is, said Annie. Are you and Annie coming with us? Eli asked Jack. No, we have to go back to America now, said Jack. How'll you get there? Asked Leo. In the magic treehouse, said Jack. Can we play in your treehouse someday? Asked Leo. Absolutely, said Jack. When you come to America, you can do anything you want. The three black cars were waiting in the parking lot beside the airfield. Teddy got 4 of the children settled into the first car, and Jack and Annie tucked their 4 into the second car. See you guys, said Jack. Be good. Jack closed the door and stood in the dark with Annie and Teddy as Kathleen guided Sophie and Sarah to the third car in the lot. Before they reached it, the door swung open and the man and woman climbed out. They were tall and well-dressed. When the man and woman saw Sophie and Sarah, they both burst into sobs. They knelt down and held out their arms. My babies, he said, grabbing Sophie and Sarah and pulling them close. Sophie and Sarah started crying too. Papa, Mama, Papa, Mama. For a long time, Sophie, Sarah, and their parents held each other and cried. They were still holding on to each other as they stumbled back to their car and climbed into the back seat together. Jack felt tears on his cheeks. Kathleen and Annie were sniffling. Teddy cleared his throat and clapped his hands together. Victory, he said. Victory, said Jack, smiling. Then he held up 2 fingers. What about Eli and Eddie and Leo and all the other kids? Annie asked Kathleen. What will happen with them? Yeah, so we will locate relatives and friends to care for them, said Kathleen. I will go to London and produce them until they are safely placed in new homes. Thank you for saving them, said Annie. Thank you, Annie, said Kathleen, for remaining hopeful and helping make a plan when we were almost ready to give up. No problem, said Annie. Together, you and Jack saved their lives and mine, said Kathleen. You are my heroes, Jack shrugged. I'm not a hero, he said. Kathleen looked into his eyes. She took his hand. You are a hero, Jack. Believe me, and you are a wonderful jet driver, too. Jack laughed. Kathleen smiled a radiant smile. Well, until we meet again for a while, she said. Teddy, are you coming? Yes, I will join you for the ride to London, said Teddy. Wait for me. Good. Kathleen blew Jack and Annie a kiss. Then she climbed into the first car. Teddy turned to them. If you have a minute before you leave, the pilot of the plane would like to see you, he said. Great, said Jack. He had lots of questions for the SOE pilot. Like what kind of plane was he flying? Teddy, Annie, and Jack hurried away from the parking lot across the grounds of the ancient abbey in the moonlight. Jack looked back at the landing field. The silver plane wasn't there. Where did it go? He asked, hurrying alongside Teddy. The plane... Ah, yes, the plane is gone, but the pilot remains behind, Teddy said mysteriously. Come with me. Through the misty air, they passed the glistening pond and the sheep asleep in the grass. Just beyond the hedgerows were the ruins of the pillars and the archways. There, on that bench, said Teddy. Jack could barely make out a person sitting on the stone bench. The person's back was to them, and he was wearing a dark cloak. Oh, said Annie with a grin. Got it. Got what, said Jack? Got the whole thing, said Annie. I just figured it out. She hurried to the bench and sat next to the man. They were talking softly. The next moment they were talking softly. The man had a deep voice. Whoa, said Jack. Suddenly he got it too. He walked over to the man and sat next to Annie and the man. Hi, Merlin, said Jack as casually as he could. Good evening, Jack, Merlin said. The magician was wearing a black cloak with a cowl over his head. His long white beard shone in the moonlight. So Teddy sent for you? Asked Jack. Yes, said Merlin. And you knew how to fly and find a special military plane, said Jack. No, said the magician of Camelot. I knew how to conjure a special plane to suit your needs, one that could carry 14 passengers and take off and land without being seen or heard. Cool, murmured Jack, still trying to sound cool. I know this was an especially difficult mission for you, said Merlin. You experienced firsthand what it means to live in constant terror. Yes, said Jack. You know what it feels like to be afraid, to speak or move about freely, said Merlin. We do, said Annie. You have seen cruel people hunt down the innocent, even children, said Merlin. Jack and Annie nodded. But you overcame your fears in order to accomplish your missions, said Merlin. Teddy found 2 excellent recruits in Fight for Freedom. There is no way I can adequately thank you, but allow me to try. Thank you, both of you, and I hope to see you again soon. You too, said Annie. Any time, said Jack. Merlin stood up from the bench. Well, goodbye, he said. Have a safe trip home. Bye, said Annie. Jack and Annie watched the master magician of all time walk and disappear like smoke among the ruins. Wow, Annie breathed. Wow, indeed, said Teddy, stepping from the shadows. Now are you ready to go home? Jack and Annie stood up from the bench and followed Teddy to the treehouse. Teddy's large duffel bag sat at the base of the tree. Teddy reached in and pulled the sneakers out in Jack's pack. You can have your stuff back, he said. Thanks, Jack, and you can have your stuff back too. Jack and Annie pulled off their farm boots, overalls, and shirts. Jack shivered in his shorts and t-shirt as he and Annie changed into their sneakers and tied their laces. Jack slipped a pencil and notebook into the pack and handed the pack to Teddy. Thanks for lending this to us, he said. You're welcome, said Teddy. I will have to make a good story for Winston about how I got all of you out of France. But now I better catch the ride to London. Until next time, cheerio, chaps. Cheerio, chaps, said Jack and Annie together. Onward, said Teddy. Then he slung his duffel bag over his shoulder and headed toward the parking lot. Jack and Annie watched Teddy march briskly toward the hedgerows. Just before he rounded the corner, he turned and gave them a salute. Then he was gone. Jack and Annie climbed the rope ladder into the treehouse. Annie grabbed the Pennsylvania book. Ready, she said. Wait, Jack heard the steady hum of planes overhead. He and Annie looked up at the night sky and saw distant lights. I wonder if those are D-Day planes, said Annie. Yeah, I wonder if they're heading to Normandy, said Jack. The planes kept moving through the night sky, more planes and more and more. It's time for us to Go, said Annie. Definitely, said Jack. Annie pointed to the photo of Frog Creek Woods. I wish we could go there, she said. The wind started to blow, the treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. Frog Creek was warm in the summer sunset. Jack breathed in the smell of dry wood and green leaves. He felt as if he had never smelled anything so good and so safe. Nice, said Annie. Jack just nodded. His heart was too heavy to talk about what he had just seen and done. He picked up his backpack and climbed down the rope ladder. Annie followed. In silence, they started through the late summer woods, crossing in and out of dark shadows. War really is a terrible thing, said Annie finally. Jack nodded. I don't understand it, said Annie. Why would anyone want to hurt people like Sophie and Sarah and their parents, or Tom and Theo, or the old man at the train station? I don't know, said Jack. And how would anyone want to hurt those little kids, said Annie? What if the Nazis caught Eddie, Leo, and Eli, and all the others? Jack shuddered. It was unbearable to think about. Germany, England, France, Italy, and the United States all worked together for peace in the world, said Annie. Right, said Jack. And they're all good friends. And the United States fought Japan also in the war, too, said Annie. But now they're good friends? Right, said Jack. Cool, said Annie. Now let's just think about Gaston, Suzette, Sylvie, Tom, and Theo, and they're driving out the milk truck. They all tried to do the right thing. During war, I think a lot of people tried to do the right thing. Don't you? Yeah, said Jack. Jack and Annie left their shadowy woods and crossed the street into the bright sunshine sidewalk, and the warmth and beauty of the light lifted Jack's spirits. I love our lives, said Annie with a sigh. Me too, said Jack, especially our freedom. Like the freedom to ride our bikes to the lake and the library, said Annie. The freedom to watch movies and eat popcorn and play Scramble with Mom and Dad and cook outside on the grill and visit our grandparents and our great-grandparents. Yeah, a million things like that, said Jack. Right now I have a whole new appreciation for the familiar, ordinary things in life. Jack and Annie turned into their yard and climbed the steps to the front porch. Before Jack opened the screen door, he looked at Annie. Hey, did you think the airplane pilot would turn out to be Merlin, he asked. No way, I definitely did not see that coming, said Annie. Did you? Not in a million years, said Jack with a grin. Then he headed inside their house. More information about World War II. World War II was fought all over the world from 1939 until 1945. The war involved more than 30 countries. It was fought between two main groups of powers, the Allied powers and the Axis powers. The chief Allied powers were Great Britain and the Soviet Union and the United States. The chief Axis powers were Germany, Italy, and Japan. At the time of World War II, Germany was led by a brutal dictator named Adolf Hitler, who was the lead of the political party called the Nazis. Beginning in 1938, Hitler's army Nazi forces quickly invaded many European countries, including Austria, Poland, and Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, France, Denmark, Yugoslavia, Greece, and Norway. In the summer of 1940, Germany's Air Force attacked Great Britain. Under the leadership of Prime Minister Winston Churchill, the British withstood the attack and defeated Germany in the Battle of Britain. It was the first feat for Germany in the war. The United States did not directly become involved in the World War II until 1941. On December 7th, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor's a U.S. naval base in Hawaii, and the next day the United States declared war on Japan. Soon after, Hitler declared war on the United States. The United States joined the Allied powers and fought the Axis powers in many countries all over the world from the next 4 years. World War II ended on September 2nd, 1945, when Japan was the last country to formally surrender to the Allies. The war lasted for 6 years and 1 day. It is estimated that during the time 50 million to 85 million people lost their lives. D-Day. On June 6, 1944, 150,000 Allied soldiers invaded the coast of Normandy in France and fought Hitler's army. D-Day was the largest land, air, and sea invasion of the history of the world. It became the turning point for the World War II. Spies and the resistance. During World War II, spies were sent behind enemy lines to gather information for their side. In Great Britain, Prime Minister Winston Churchill formed a highly secret spy organization known as the SOE, which stood for Special Operations Executive. Both men and women were members of the SOE. They were ordinary people from all walks of life who were willing to risk their lives to defeat the Nazis. In Nazi-occupied countries, there were also many hidden groups known as resistance who were trying to fight Hitler's army. Often working with the Allied spies, resistance groups used wireless radios to communicate secretly with Allied forces. They also resisted and invaded through acts of sabotage, such as blowing up rail lines used by Nazi soldiers for traveling and for transporting weapons. War pigeons. During World War II, pigeons were used by both the Allied and the Axis powers to carry messages across Europe. The pigeons were known as carrier pigeon or homing pigeons. They were used to carriers because they could fly at high altitudes and find their way home from handlers many miles away. Soldiers and spies would place a message in the small canister attached to the pigeon's foot. Then the pigeon would carry the message home. Great Britain had a national prison service which used over 200,000 carrier pigeons. One of the most famous British pigeons was named Commando. Commando flew more than 90 missions carrying messages from agents in France to soldiers in Britain. He received a medal for his excellent service and today is remembered one of the bravest creatures who ever served at a war. The Germany Enigma machine. During any war, military messages were often inserted by the enemy. In order to disguise the message, military forces developed highly secret codes. They also trained code breakers who try to decipher or crack the enemy's codes. Germany used one of the most complicated code systems of all time. Germany created their code with a device called an Enigma machine. Enigma means puzzle. The Enigma machine was a complicated typewriter designed to create a code that was nearly impossible to decipher. To make things even more difficult, the code was changed every day. Tanks. Tanks were invented by the British during the war. 1. Soon other countries also began using them. Thousands of tanks were built each month during the war. The earlier tanks could hardly move faster than a person walking. But by World War II, tanks had greatly improved. They were far more durable than the earlier tanks and could travel over very rough terrains. Most countries used their tanks to carry powerful weapons, but German tanks didn't have strong armor or firepower. It made them lighter and faster. The German tanks helped the Nazis develop a tactic known as Blitzkrieg, which means lightning war. A blitzkrieg is an attack that uses speed and surprise and encircle and destroy an enemy. Germany was able to win and land battles using their technique. Submarines and aircraft carriers. Much of World War II was fought on the ocean. The battleships had been most powerful naval weapons in previous wars, but World War II marked the beginning of the era. The invasion of the submarines changed the way naval battles were fought. Both the Allies and the Axis powers used submarines. German submarines were called U-boats. The submarine was a Volt war machine as it could travel underwater for short periods of time. Submarines used an underwater missile called a torpedo to sink large ships. In addition of submarines, aircraft carriers were also a naval warfare. These enormous ships carried airplanes that could take off and land on the ship, as well as land back on the ship. Most aircraft carriers could hold about over 30 airplanes. Airplanes played a larger role in World War II than in any previous war. Advancing technology made planes faster and more powerful. Unlike a tank or battleship, an airplane could travel anywhere, taking off from airfields or aircraft carriers. A plane could engage and combat over any sort of terrain or bodies of water. Airplanes could also provide a bird's eye view enemy of territory to help their army plan its attacks, and they could drop troops, spies, and supplies behind enemy lines via parachute. Fighter planes were especially important in World War II. Instead of dropping bombs like bomb planers, fighting planes faced each other in the air. There were almost 150 different kinds of fighter planes used during the war. One of the most famous of these planes was called the North American P-51 Mustang. It could fly higher and make sharper turns than any other plane. The Holocaust, the Nazis were extremely prejudiced against the Jewish people. Under Hitler's leadership, the Nazis killed millions of Jewish people as well as members of any ethnic and politic minority groups to escape prison and death. Some Jewish families went into hiding. They hid in caves or barns or under the floorboards of a friend's house. They had to be very secretive or quiet for days at a time. The Diary of Anne Frank. In the Netherlands, a Jewish girl named Anne Frank and her family secret to move into the building her father worked. The price for helping someone wanted by the Nazis was death. In spite of the work, his co-workers and Anne's father's help, the Frank family hid in the back of the building. When they left their home, Anne and her family wore several layers of clothing because they did not want to be seen carrying suitcases into her father's work building. While they were hiding, they spent long hours every day to being very quiet and hardly moving. Anne wrote in her diary to pass time. She and her family lived there for 2 years until they were captured. After World War II ended, the whole world was horrified and learned of a full extreme of Nazi persecution and innocent people. People everywhere were deeply moved by the publication of Anne Frank's diary. Perhaps the most famous words of her diary were, "In spite of everything, I still believe that people are really great at heart." World War II greatly affect almost every country in the world, and so many terrible things happened that is hard to fully comprehend its horrors. But over time, a young girl's diary has helped people to grieve for all those who since died. So, goodbye, and just so you know, I didn't tell you this before because I forgot. I'm a 7-year-old kid. So, bye, and I hope to see you next time.